Rehearsal over, guys. We're gonna start up the
All
real
right.
deal.
We'll try again. Okay, we will call to order the July 20th, 2022 meeting of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority. Cindy, please call the roll.
Thank you. John?
Present.
Carson?
Here. Still
Skippy?
Bugsy Tony Phil says yes.
Francie? Here. Allison? Yes. Rachel?
Here.
Kelly?
Deja vu all over again.
She's on mute.
Sheer on the internet.
I know she's probably traveling, so that's okay.
Very good. So the first item on our agenda is public comment. We have a 3-minute time limit. So please, if you want to go ahead and, I think Robin, you were here first. If you want to go ahead and approach the microphone here, just please identify. Please identify yourself and.
Do I have to sit down? Yeah, and the
Yeah.
buttons. Well, you have to get close to the mic.
I have to push the button?
No, it's on.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
And you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Robin Ferguson Kelly. I live at 103 Williams Way in Aspen. It's an APCHA ownership property. And my neighbor at 104 Williams Way, Enrique Bienkowski, has been using his unit as a short-term rental. Sometimes he's living there, sometimes he's not living there, and there's just a steady stream of people coming and going. I've been taking video of them. I've got license plates, but I don't have any legal way to find out who the license plate belongs to according to the Pitkin County Sheriff's Department. So I don't know what I can do about this, and I wanted to get some direction from the APCHA board. I've got, hours and hours of video, people coming and going, and one day there's Australian people there, then there's a black guy, and then there's somebody from Romania, and then Venezuela, of course, Texas, of course, and California, and the HOA will not get involved in it. And I asked APCHA just this week if any of his neighbors, he had qualified any of those people. In order for him to keep everybody qualified, I think they have to stay there a month. And APCHA said it's a 3-bedroom, so he can have 2 guests that are qualified through APCHA. He would be in the APCHA office once a month, having to re-qualify all these people. So I don't know what I can do, really. And last year, Mick Ireland helped me out, and I don't know how he did it, but he got the renting stopped, and he actually got Enrique to move back in for about 2 or 3 months. And during that 2 or 3 months, he had no guests at all. So when he's living there by himself, there's no guests, and then sometimes he's living there, but there's all these people. I believe there's 4 people living over there right now. And then when I try to talk to them, they won't talk to us, and they don't speak English, so I'll speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish. So it's getting to be very annoying not knowing who my neighbors are. And they smoke cigarettes on the back porch, and it comes into my living room, and I want to know who's living next door to me, and then you can work out with them. Okay, you shovel on Monday, I'll shovel on snow on Tuesday, and you can make out arrangement with them with a constant stream of people. It's like you're just living in a hotel or Airbnb or whatever he's doing.
Okay, thank you.
What do I do?
So this is not the forum for us to discuss open compliance cases. We do have a compliance, or we have an investigation open, or we've done an investigation.
We've done an investigation.
Okay.
In the past, yes, and we have approved tenants for the unit.
Okay.
And there is, the 2 owners are in a disagreement with each other as to what's going on.
So this board has taken compliance extremely seriously,
Okay.
and we followed up on a number of compliance issues, through the regulations. But as I said, this is not really the appropriate forum to discuss specifics of an open compliance case.
Okay, what would be the forum?
So it would be with staff.
To meet with them?
Yes.
Okay. Because I asked Bethany who was approved, and she couldn't tell me.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Yeah.
if that's public information or right. As the housing authority, there's regulations that we've got to follow. I'm assuming you guys have looked into this, but
We have looked into it for the past, I think, 18 months, and we have now found approved tenants in the unit, and we've spoken at length with Mr. Bienkowski, and have found no documentation that he lives elsewhere. We, I think, have provided in the past a tenant name.
Yeah, I think it was
once
about a year and a half ago.
a year and a half ago. I certainly can provide you with a tenant name of who we have approved recently.
Okay,
Your HOA might have rules requiring them to know who is living in units.
they don't.
They don't. Okay.
They don't want to get involved, so either APCHA helps me, or I don't know it, or I just give up and say, okay.
And
it
we can
can
certainly,
continue.
yeah, we can let you know who we've approved, but that's where it ends.
And Williams Way is outside of the city
Pitkin County.
limits.
It's in the county.
It's in the
in the
county.
county.
And I was gonna say, the city has purchased the software and scroll through all short-term rental listing major sites that we can. I think it's like 20 or 24 of them.
Anyone on Zoom hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And but we only track that within municipal limits. And I don't know if the county has now purchased that sort of,
I cannot hear anyone on Zoom or in the room. I'm unclear if the meeting has started.
It
yeah,
has.
it has,
I
and
can hear you. I was wondering the same thing.
Okay, thank
Kelly,
you.
can you
Oh, Kelly, can you hear us now?
hear us now?
Yes.
Sorry, we were on mute as admin.
yeah.
We are now back, and we
Okay,
can hear
so,
you guys.
yeah, I have no idea if the meeting started 10 minutes ago or not. So we may need to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah, so we did, and we've opened up public comment, and Robin has, I'm sorry, Robin, what should I say?
Ferguson.
Robin Kelly had public comment on an open compliance case, and Bethany has been giving us an update on that.
Is it possible also to get any video from the GrassRoots feed into the room? I can put myself on video so you all can see me, but I can't see.
There we go. We can see you. Can you see us?
Do you want to start?
No. Oh, there we go. Okay.
There we go.
We've worked out our tech problems. I'm here. I don't know if Francie was here. I don't think she
Francie's
was
here.
planning.
He's here.
But I think I
I'm
see
here.
her. Okay, glad we have a quorum, and sorry, I'm sorry, Robin, I didn't hear your comments. Maybe the board can summarize for me.
I think Carson just was summarizing, Kelly.
Yeah, so,
Summarize again.
yeah, so long
thing
story
today.
short, I mean, we've got an open compliance case. It sounds to me like staff has looked into it. And like I say, I mean, this is not really the forum for the board to discuss open compliance cases.
Okay.
And just to finish my comment, I don't know if the county's finance department has purchased that sort of software yet to be able to track STRs in the county with their new STR program, but we were particularly targeting to make sure none were in affordable housing within city limits, and I think that would be a function that your program could do in the future to assure there's not listings for this unit or any other APCHA unit in the
I'm
county.
sure that's something you probably researched.
We do. We
right?
check open listings on both Airbnb and VRBO, and we are very good at looking at pictures to determine whether it's a unit of ours or not. Historically, is what we have done, and we've certainly looked at this for this unit.
Yeah, I mean, there's always leakage with people potentially renting to friends without a site, but again, the system we have scrolls every day, 24 or more different sites, not just the top few. So it might be worth, again, I'm just thinking kind of meshing with the county's compliance efforts on their own STR. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you, Robin.
Okay,
Robin.
thank you.
Okay, other public comment. Jake?
Good afternoon. I'm Jacob Stewart. I've been fortunate enough to live here in the Valley for just over going on 6 years. And a little over a year ago, we were blessed enough to win an APCHA unit. And it was a 2-bedroom. I have 3 children with my wife, and we were coming from a 1-bedroom, so that was a huge step up. And so I just want to lay that out as a preface that I'm not here to complain. I'm very grateful for the system. I'm just here with some thoughts. My main thought that I'm here for today is a little over a year ago when we bid on our unit, it was a Category 4, and I'm currently a Category 2, and with the numbers the way they are in my career, as I love it in this county, I will probably be in a Category 2 for a very, very long time. And with the rule that I've noticed has been in place over the last several months, I don't know how long it's been in place, but I do track open listings as they become available. I'm on the email list. I've realized that we can no longer bid more than one category above where we're at. The unit that I'm in now, like I said, is a Category 4, and our hope in bidding on 2 bedrooms and winning a 2-bedroom was that one day we would be able to score a 3-bedroom through the in-complex. And so it seems like that hope has kind of been tarnished now with that rule. And like I said, I'm not here to complain. I understand that there's compliance issues and probably a lot more that I don't understand as to why that rule was established. And so I'm just here hoping that I can be heard and let you know that it sucks because we don't want to be in the 3-bedroom forever.
A 2-bedroom.
Sorry, a 2-bedroom forever, yeah.
Yeah.
And I do know, like, for example, my brother is also in, I think he's in a Category 1 and has been there for a very long time. And with 2 kids, he probably won't be able to get into a 3-bedroom for a very long time. Maybe the lumberyard, but it's a long ways out. So thank you for your time, and thank you for what you guys do. I don't think it's easy, so thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
Firefighter?
I work with the sheriff's office.
Well, we've got a 3-bedroom. We can't rent the bigger units today. We all wanted smaller ones, but
Yeah.
there's some bigger units available, and the fire district was, we're partnering and renting. Obviously, firefighters get priority, but
Yeah.
it's public service as well. And I know I know we have a dispatch. Somebody's moving into one of the dispatchers moving
Yeah.
in. But
Yeah, and the rental's kind of a different realm that I'm not completely familiar with. We would love to purchase like we do now. I think everyone knows the benefits, so that's mostly what I'm bringing to the table. So
Thank you
yeah, thank you.
again.
Thanks. Okay, any other public comment in the room? And if not, we'll go online.
Sorry, Carson. I wonder if it would help to just give a little back explanation as to why we passed that. Since Jake came, and we did have that conversation recently.
Yeah, do you want to?
Do you want staff to? Okay.
So,
I'm happy to, yeah.
I know that one of the considerations that we had was that if we're jumping 2 categories, obviously, generally, we're going to be going to a higher category, and there's, capital repair and improvement costs.
dues are a lot
HOA dues,
higher.
right?
Maintenance
All
of
of
the
those
property's
things
a lot
are
higher.
associated with that. I think what's unique in this case is, we're talking about in-complex to in-complex, which wouldn't really apply in that case, right? Because you're going from.
I don't know that we've detailed that aspect in the policy, but I think it's worthy of discussion, being in complex. I can empathize with you. I bought my unit a very long time ago over at Hunter Creek. I had 2 people, and I don't think at that time I was paying attention to what category it was or wasn't as much. And it was advertised in the Aspen Daily News, as a matter of fact. Nobody had bid on it in over a year. It was right before the writs went in and the whole dynamic changed. But I'm at a point now where my HOA dues average at least $900 a month, and that's pretty hard. It's to a point where my payments are equal to my appreciation each month, and so that is the dilemma that people get into. And it's a challenge because there's times you have a higher income and times you have a lower income, but that was really the issue of finding units that were turning over that were in bad repair, and the people had overextended themselves to try to get any unit they could. You know, as we know, that's the dynamic here, and ending up, you know, both cost burdened, maybe 50% or more of their income, and then not able to keep up with the issues.
Allison.
This has been in place for a little while because I was not part of this decision, and I think that banks should know whether the families can afford it or not. So it does, in situations like this, it breaks my heart that kind of we made that call for you. Like, you probably can't financially handle the mortgage. We're seeing people being over cost burden, over a third of their income going towards housing. That's not the point of the affordable housing program. It's to be livable, right? So that's unfortunate. I think the error in that decision is because of how our houses are priced based on sales. You could be bidding on category 3s right now that are more expensive than category 4s that are available. So again, like in my opinion, a bank would be able to say, you can afford this based on, you know, everything I'm seeing or not. And your income based on the sales price is not the same as your income based on categories. And so I really appreciate all public comment in general, and hearing very specific cases where we might be able to reconsider some things in the future, because had we not heard this story, this isn't on our radar. So thank you for coming and sharing.
I think.
Can I just speak one of the other reasons that this went into play was the equitable nature of this. If you are a category 4, you are constantly bidding against category 1, 2s, and 3s, and 4s. And so there's this perspective of the category 4s, the folks that were winning kept being category 1, and yet that category 4 household cannot bid on category 1, 2, and 3. And so there was the approach from our perspective was, yes, there's an affordability piece, but the real piece was looking at who's bidding
fairness.
And the fairness of it. That category 4 household can't bid on anything else.
Thank you.
So
yeah, so the whole needs assessment, right, as things progress, and we're going to meet someone new today who's going to have exciting news about some of the big program analysis that can come down. So do we have enough category 2 family opportunities right now?
I will say we're trying to price the Burlingame 3 units at a lower category 2 and 3 mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I mean, I think maybe the thing that I sort of struggle with in this particular case is if you're talking about in complex, right? And so maybe that's something we put on a future agenda to discuss. Is
That's
maybe
what I was saying,
maybe
yeah.
there's an exception if it's in complex. So
Yeah. You know, one other last comment on that is, and you pointed out really well, Allison, I appreciate it, is how to try to get the whole picture.
Right.
Because it would be one thing to say, oh, it's in complex, that should be okay, and then find out it's an M complex with a horribly deficient capital reserve fund, and they're going to be hit with large special assessments very quickly.
Right.
That would be a different type of in complex.
Right.
So I think we have to look at all the factors.
great. Thanks. And is there anyone else in the room with public comment? I don't think so. I think our next looks like Brittany. If you want to go ahead and unmute yourself. And you've got 3 minutes here.
Perfect. Well, thank you all for allowing me to comment. I wrote this down. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my fiance, Tom Manas. We won first place in the housing lottery on August 24th, 2020, almost 2 years ago. Some, if not many of you, may be familiar with our situation from past public comment or from the articles published in the paper sharing our battle and struggles with closing on this house and watching it deteriorate in front of our eyes the past 2 years. The property was listed for sale with liens against it comprising of more than the value of the house, a bankrupt seller, and a failing retaining wall in the back, and in an unbelievable state. The pipes burst twice while we were under contract, even after we sounded the alarms and pleaded with APCHA. Among many other issues, we still to this day find ourselves begging APCHA staff to do right by us. We've been begging for answers and a roadmap for how to move forward for years. Our calls go mainly unanswered and emails are returned with vague and uninformative responses. We've been asking for a solution and have spent much time researching the costs to condemn, replace, and work through the permits and more for this property. It is currently a Category 4 property, meaning that the max sales price is $418,000. In short, the cost to replace and repair this home is more than the max sales price that we would be able to recoup. The numbers don't work, and APCHA knows this. Nonetheless, just shared this morning, APCHA shared that they would be buying the land from Alpine Bank and passing the costs on to us, and that we would need to eat the cost to repair this property. APCHA has made many policy changes for the future, but they cannot do anything retroactively for us. How can this be right? APCHA is making a stance that it is okay to pass the buck on to the next generation to deal with. We need help and we need your support. We need a fair playing ground like everyone else received, and not an unfortunate lottery draw. Tom and I have endured real opportunity costs, and we need a fair solution. We are willing ourselves to do the work to deal with the permits, but we cannot be expected to eat the costs. It has been almost 2 years since the day that we won this lottery for this house, and we are still battling through it. We do not have answers. We do not have a clear roadmap. And we feel utterly disrespected by the APCHA team. We just want this to be fair and right. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you, Brittany. Okay. Any other public comment? Hearing none, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will move to executive director's comments and a staff update. Kelly.
I'd like to request a future exec session about this transaction.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, Matthew, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Nice to see you all. So, first of all, I wanted to introduce Liz Axberg, who is a 2020 graduate of St. Catherine's University in Minnesota. Liz is joining us as our housing analyst. I believe we tempted her away from the VISTA program, right? Vista? Vista. Yeah. So we're very excited to have Liz with us, and we're going to be putting her to work.
Very
Excellent.
What's the title? Housing policy analyst.
And Diana's going to elaborate.
And sorry, I would be remiss in not clarifying that this is a City of APCHA position, and Liz works with me, and the reason that's relevant is
City of
that.
Aspen.
Sorry.
City of
You
APCHA.
said City of APCHA. Oh, wait, it is a company town.
It's understandable.
Strike that from the record, please. Like that. We've grown. We need T-shirts. And the reason
Swag.
that's relevant is that the city and county have been wonderful about splitting all the costs for APCHA 50-50. And so this position is specifically one that works for City of Aspen. So absolutely, Liz will be working on APCHA issues. In fact, yesterday was APCHA Day, and she's going to be spending a ton of time with Andrew learning home track. And she's got, as Sarah pointed out in last night's council meeting, joint BOCC council meeting where she was introduced, she's got a econometrics and public policy degree. So she's incredibly well qualified, and we're super excited to have her here. But she will also be working on a lot of analysis for City of Aspen new development projects. Thanks.
Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Liz. I look forward to getting to know you better and figuring out how our scopes overlap. I do a lot of the housing policy work for BOCC as just some of my board appointments, including this one. So welcome. I am curious. I feel like maybe Diane, I don't know how this falls. When we were initially learning about this position, last year, I thought that there was some kind of grant application role here, and I'm wondering if that is the case or not, because I'm not totally clear on Liz's scope, but very happy to have her on your team.
You are correct. The grants is a different role, and Matthew can provide an update on that one.
We do have money to hire that grants person. We have not found that grants person. We've put out several, we've tried very hard, and we've put out an RFP, and we did not receive any inquiries. So we are going to be trying again, but this person may not exist in the current job market. So we are going to be redoubling our efforts and trying again, but our first effort was unsuccessful.
Okay, great. I really appreciate that update. Thanks, Matt.
And I apologize. I should have mentioned that earlier. Sorry about that.
More housing staff is always better than less housing staff. So I'm thrilled that there are multiple opportunities. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome, Liz. We're not going to let you be so quiet next time. We'll get you.
Yeah.
Great. The other thing, a couple of things I wanted to highlight, and I think it was just last week, but City Council approved us using some of the already appropriated money in a different way, and that is to improve the Home Trek forward-facing customer service aspect of it. So we're not replacing the whole system. We're taking already appropriated money through the county and the city, which was on the table, and Andrew is working very hard, and we put out bids, and we have a company hired, and so we're kind of trying to redo the front half of it to make it much more easy to use and cut down on paper. So we're very excited about it. We have a great team working on it and a really good company, and we hope hoping that'll be about 6 months, so not such a long time before we see real improvements in the public-facing side of Home Trek. Good. And then I also wanted to highlight some of the communication we've been doing recently. I had to clarify what this actually meant, because I was thinking in terms of clicks, but it's actually unique users. So our unique users on our Facebook site went up from 6,289 last month, the month before, to 8,200 last month. We have about 500 followers who actually follow us, and our Facebook Live sessions have been getting more and more people watching them. And I'm not sure, I lost track of time, so I'm not sure I told you this one. We did one in Spanish on how to buy a home, so that was me breaking out my rusty Spanish, but luckily Julia Peralta, who's on our staff and is bilingual, she and I did that, and we hope to do that again when Julia is back from maternity leave. I'm also trying to get out and about in the community. I had lunch today with a group of faith leaders down in Basalt at St. Peter's, and there are other organizations I hope to reach out and tell the APCHA story. We've met, as you know, several times with Woody Creek, and I also went out and we had a sit down with Aspen Country Inn. And then this segues into what we're doing tomorrow. Tomorrow we're doing Facebook Live, and we're doing it in conjunction with CORE. Some of you may have seen, yeah, so you got a letter signed by me and John Doherty from CORE, if you're in APCHA housing. John and I chatted in the past couple weeks, and CORE has 60 residential assessments available to APCHA owners. We'll be discussing that tomorrow in the Facebook Live session on how to apply for those. And then even better, not just the assessment, there's actual real money on the table to make improvements for APCHA owners. So it's a really good initiative between us and CORE, and we hope it's the first of many, especially as the new CORE leadership comes on board. We think it's a great opportunity, and hopefully it'll be a long-standing partnership between the two of us. I just want to briefly talk about compliance. There have been some compliance.
That's Kelly.
Sorry, Kelly. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly on that. If folks obtain a grant for improvements, do those improvements get counted in adjusted value?
We went through this, and I think they are outside the 10% limit. Right, I got that right, because I kept going back and forth in my mind.
If the
That-
deed restriction allows it.
If the deed restriction allows it, they do not count against the 10% improvement cap.
Well, but are we gonna credit them that even if it's paid for by a government grant?
For the
We-
resale value, would you be adding it to?
Right.
If they get a grant and they're not paying for it, that's kind of double dipping. I don't know. We haven't really talked about
I
that.
don't think we've,
Okay.
we weren't that subtle when we were thinking about it, so we'll have to figure that out and make that clear to people. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks. I think
Matthew,
we should talk about that. Thank you.
does CORE look at any bigger projects, like complex-wide? I think, like the individual assessments.
Yeah, we're hoping to do at least one big assessment as well.
Amazing.
Right. And John and I have talked about that, and there's some money available for that. We're hoping in this year and then going forward. Okay. And now it's going to talk about compliance briefly. We do have more compliance cases, and you all have been great, but just reminding you, if people want to talk to you about compliance cases, please don't, because you will ultimately have to, if the hearing officer rules a certain way, you guys will see that case again. So please don't talk about it too much. Thank you. And then in the paper yesterday, there were some comments about APCHA from the county, and I just want to extend my invitation, Francie and Kelly. I'd love to come out, and if any of your colleagues on the county want to, talk to me, happy to do so. There, either in terms of specific problems, we're always looking to do better, and if there are more general problems, when it's more of an image problem, I'd love to hear about those too. And that, of course, applies to my colleagues on the city side too. If any problems, any concerns, I want to hear about them. I'd prefer not to hear about them in the paper. So
We would love to have you come and
yeah,
talk to
please.
the
No, let's do
commissioners.
that. Let's do that.
And, I was saying to Skippy that it was last night, John was peppered with many questions about APCHA by board members, which was, I think, a symptom of how we haven't been communicating
Right.
clearly enough with
Yeah.
the BOCC for them to really have an understanding of what's going on. So poor John fielded a lot of questions that had nothing to do with his application
I have a
whatsoever.
lot of good stuff up, so.
All right. Well,
I will jump in. I think there is a little urgency. I believe, Matthew, that BOCC staff have been trying to reach out to try and schedule something with us. So we have been talking about this among our board for a couple months and would love to do that. The dynamic may have changed if we're going to do this as a joint city-county meeting, but I know that there is urgency on our board.
Okay, we'll chat and we'll figure it out. Great. That's all I have. Diane, do you have anything? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Cindy, you've got available rental sale units.
We will, starting on Friday. I highly recommend people sign up for new, especially if you want to purchase. We have, I can't remember the exact units, but we have a Category 3, a Category 4, and a Category 5 unit coming up for sale on Friday. Open houses will be next Wednesday. Be sure to sign up for those. News bulletins that come up that you can sign up for, notifications on our website. I don't know, have we added any new rentals?
No, I just closed one today.
Okay. But we still do, if you are a lower income household, we still have quite a few Truscott or low income housing tax credit units. We still have some at Aspen Country Inn, and especially 2 bedrooms at Truscott Phase 2, and the income is just very, very low. So if you have any questions, please contact us and we can let you know what that maximum income range is for a household of 2.
I'd love to get that chart you gave me yesterday.
Yeah, okay, I'll look at it again for it, yeah. I guess I'm just wondering, and it's really maybe out of left field, but I know that for hiring practices, if you've advertised for a certain period of time and not been able to pull in an employee, then you may be able to get, it used to be the immigrant permits for a green card worker. And that, it was just kind of a test to make sure you really were pursuing a American worker. Is there any sort of standard that's at all similar to low-income tax credits where we could approach CHA and talk to them and say, hey, we're running into a problem here that no one is qualifying? And it can't be their intent to have empty units. And I'm just wondering, are there any sort of ways or circumstances that you can prove that you've been trying, you're legitimate, your door's open, and just nobody's coming through to be able to raise those standards? And is that an inquiry we can make?
I am going to try to contact their lawyer. I've tried it once before, and they pretty much said that there isn't that much we can do. It's actually run by HUD, which is a federal program. The Colorado Housing Finance Authority is the one that oversees it for the state of Colorado.
Right.
I'm going to try I'm going to try again to see if there's anything that we can do if we keep telling them that these units are sitting empty because we just can't find people to qualify for it. It's the approval for our tax credit properties is different than like Truscott, Centennial. For all the units that are not tax credit, we look at income based on last year's W-2s and what they did last year. The LIHTC looks at what they're going to be doing in the next 12 months. So and they have to put down what they think they're going to be making. We get the information from there. It's all third-party employment verification forms. The tenant can't bring them in, has to come from the employer. Bank statements have to come from the bank. It's very specific. It's got to be third party. It can't come from sources. It can't come from like somebody just even paycheck stubs. They still need an employment verification form filled out by their employer, not given to the employee, but given to us. So there's such stringent rules with regards to tax credits. But I'm going to try Colorado Housing Finance Authority again one more time and see if there is anything else that we can do.
Kelly, did you have something on this?
Yeah, I think an important conversation to have with them would to be related to the changes allowing undocumented residents to have access to housing benefits. I've always maintained that still is in effect. I think there was some question about whether it was going to, only until July of this year. So two things. I do think that rule perpetuates, and it would be an important conversation to have with CHA about if there's a way to allow for that. And then I think we would need to change our regulations at APCHA as well to allow for that, and that maybe perhaps would be a path to filling these units as well.
Correct.
Yeah, if I could finish, I was just going to say, and I appreciate that, Kelly. I think that makes a lot of sense. It strikes a funny chord is they want to get the information from the employer, and then the employer is going to be literally on the record saying, I'm hiring someone who's not qualified. So there might be a catch-22 in there somewhere with the low-income tax credit people and the employer's willingness to send in paperwork along those lines. But the other alternatives would be, are there any way you can buy back out of low-income tax credits? And I've wondered whether this is better as a verbal conversation or as more of a written document. And if we're not able to really succeed there, to really try to take it to our state senators, Hickenlooper or Bennett, and say, can you work with us on HUD legislation or HUD policies, admin? Because if we're experiencing this, others communities are experiencing it too. And again, the last thing you want is vacancies, So I just want to think about how to keep ramping it up more formally. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. All right. Anything else?
I have one more thing. We'll be at the Aspen Farmers Market on August 6th.
Okay, fine.
So buy me a coffee.
A Louis Swiss
I was just
pastry.
gonna say, yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
you
they're
need.
there.
All right, we will move to the consent calendar. So any adds, subtractions, changes, or a motion to approve?
We need a motion to approve?
Or to, yeah, you know what I mean.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent
Skippy, you
calendar.
can't.
I can't do that. No, I can't do that. I forgot.
I will motion to approve. Can I?
Second.
Oh, emotionalist.
And it is a roll call vote.
Okay, John,
I approve.
Carson,
Yes.
Kelly,
She's nodding.
Rachel,
Yes.
Allison.
Oh, sorry, yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item here is second quarter home truck presentation with Andrew.
Welcome back, brother.
Share my screen real quick.
I want you to really dust into the home truck for me this week. There's new listings.
Okay.
All right, so before I jump too far in, I do have one change on page 4 of the packet. I was looking through my numbers a little bit more closely the other day, and I realized I made one mistake in calculation. So I will send you an updated packet, but just in case you want those updates right now to hand scribble in. So this is for about the Q2 units that sold. So I had marked 3, there were actually 4. So when you redo those calculations, it does change the average sales prices on all of that. I will present that. That is updated in my current slide deck that I'll be sharing with you today, but I will send out an updated version of this packet with those adjusted numbers.
Is this printed version the updated?
Yeah. No, I didn't catch them until after I had printed it as well. I was looking through it last night and I went, something doesn't seem right here. So my apologies on that one. One thing I'm going to do a little bit different today is instead of going through each page, which I don't think is the best use of your guys' time, all the data is right here for you to look at. I did try to pull out a lot of the key takeaways as I had done in kind of that textual first few pages there as well, but present it in a PowerPoint view. If we want to go back to the previous format, let me know. I'm happy to shift back, but I also know that that can be very time consuming to go page by page by page. So I did try to pull out the really important information here. But everything you'll see presented is in your packet. That page 4 update is on here as well. So moving in.
This is the first time we haven't had a chance to look through this packet yet, have we?
I sent it last night.
It's okay. It was Allison didn't have her microphone.
Okay.
The yellows. I don't think I received that, but that helps explain it.
Got it. Okay. My apologies. I'll make sure you get that next time. So looking first at inventory, we always look at the numbers first. So we had a net increase of 4. But where that net increase came from was 9 new units that were added into our inventory, but as well as 5 from this report. So kind of clarifying where that net increase of 4 comes from. The 9 units, we had 5 that were added for ACEs, the Aspen Center of Environmental Studies. They had an approval timeline of getting a deed restriction placed on it. They got it within it, and it happened that that deed restriction was placed on those 5 units during Q2, so those got added to that report. There are also 3 units at 420 East Hyman on the, what would that be, the northern pedestrian walkway in that new building. Those have not had their deed restriction placed on it, but we did put them into our inventory. They cannot get their CO without the deed restriction being placed on it, but we're accounting for those 3 additional units. So there's 8. And then the last one was actually an employer purchased unit down in Glenwood Springs for their employees. They placed an APCHA deed restriction on it, so there's our 9. Where the net increase comes from is, as I was looking through this inventory, I could figure out where 6 of my increase of 9 came from, and I couldn't figure out where the 420 East Hyman was because I hadn't received deed restriction to place onto the unit. And so as I dug a little bit more, I noticed that I had a handful of units that had not previously been filtered out but should have. One of those being Maroon Creek Office has a entry within Home Trek, and I didn't account for that in the filters to filter out the word office. That is not a livable unit, so that's why I filtered it out here. Also for Meralt reservations this year, we wanted to do something a little bit different. Typically what we do is you have to apply for the specific unit you are looking to rent. With Meralt, we don't always know what unit they're going to be in ahead of time, so we created a new unit within the system to account for reservations and basically place a hold until we can associate those tenants who've been approved for a unit to get associated with an actual unit number. So again, I pulled out that reservations unit. They have to be listed as a unit within the system in order for them to show up on the community portal. Yeah.
Question that doesn't maybe need to be answered here to derail this, and it may be for someone over here, but the employer purchase of a unit in Glenwood is like a whole new thing to me. I didn't know that happened or how it happened, so I'd love catch up at some point offline to explain that process to me.
I'll give a quick, so an employer that might own in Pitkin County, or they might own APCHA housing. So if an employer owns APCHA housing, they can't purchase another unit in the ownership exclusion zone. However, if they purchase a unit and put a deed restriction on it, it could be in Glenwood Springs, and they could put their employees in the unit. And so it's deed restricted. It's filed with the Garfield or Eagle County, depending on where the unit is located, clerk and recorder, and that deed restriction goes away when that unit is sold. So it's a deed restriction that's on it for the current owner. Does that work?
No. We'll follow up.
Okay,
Just,
that's,
yeah,
that's
shoot me
how
an email.
that's how an employer can actually get specific. A lot of times they can't. Some of the deed restrictions out there, they can't put in. They can put their own employees in there, but this way, if they have a free market unit and they put a deed restriction on it, there is a specific category on it that we put on based on their employees. And but they don't have to charge them rent. They have a little bit more leeway in some things, but we do have probably 4 or 5 owners out there that own free market, but there's recorded deed restrictions on the properties. So they have to fill them by qualified employees. So the employer is being proactive by purchasing a free market unit and putting their own employees in there by accepting that they have to put a deed restriction on the property and put qualified employees in it.
Why would an employer or anyone who buys a free market unit need to put a deed restriction on it in order to put their
To keep their
Not allowed to
APCHA deed
own free
ownership
market.
unit.
APCHA unit?
Yeah.
I'd like to drill down on that policy at a future meeting, because I was unaware of it. Yeah, thank you. Sorry. I'd like to drill down on that policy a little more. I turned it off so I wouldn't bother Drew. It sounds like this is a temporary deed restriction. It's not permanent. And if they sell the free market unit, they're able to recover free market prices. So they're able to live in an APCHA unit while they've invested in a free market unit, and have a tenant who's paying their mortgage and maybe their HOA, and they're receiving what in this past year would have been 40 or 50% appreciation because we allowed them to do that. So they own free market somewhere else, and they're able to do that because we're giving them a subsidized unit up here. So I'd like to just drill down on it. Maybe it's all fine, and maybe it's we're subsidizing someone's windfall investments, and I don't want to be doing that.
It is a regulation, so we'll bring that back for further discussion
Yeah.
For a regulation change,
Yeah.
if that's what you guys want to do.
And I just would really worry about that, I mean, that's been the whole thing about why you can't own secondary free market housing already, is that, are you in a subsidized unit and owning free market that appreciates? And this sounds like a workaround.
Bethany, just like a 10-minute follow-up call sometime this week.
Happy
Next
to.
is fine.
I can tell you that most of the folks we've seen right now are actually losing money. Their mortgages are higher than their tenants are allowed to pay. But over time, yes,
Over time.
real estate wise, but.
Yeah, I
their
mean,
home-
you look at what happened from 21 to 22, and almost everything from here to Rifle went up well over 40%.
Of course.
Cool. Thank you.
If you are interested on the full breakdown, it is at the bottom of page 4. I did include where all of this information is coming from in your packet on each of these slides in case you want to just earmark it and take a look at it. Moving on to application. So there's going to be a few slides on applications just to the nature of some of the data. So if I can get through some of those slides and then we can get some questions, because I'm hoping that the rest of the slides will give some clarification to some of the questions that you'll probably have. So looking at this, we did see an increase of total number of applications we did. We had 405 that we either approved or denied within Q2, so an increase of 123 compared to what we did in Q1. That first bullet point, there were 126 more applications denied. So that's where some of my future slides will be on. Overall, we had 274 approved out of that 405 and 131. So previously, we only had 5 denied in Q1, and we had 126 additional comparatively. So looking at some of that data just in both the approvals and the denials. These are 4 application types. The light blue is any that are approved. The dark blue are any that are denied, just so you can see the comparison within each bracket. One thing to note here is this is including both initial qualifications and requalifications if requalifications apply. Seasonal rentals and sales ownerships, we do not go through a requalification process. Really the only difference between requalification and qualification is that additional 150% that we allow over the category. With seasonal rental and sales, they have to, as though it's their first time qualifying with regard to the income limits. Within kind of each of those brackets, just to give you a little bit of a breakdown, in our long term, we had about 140 approved and 62 denied. In tax credit, we had 32 approved and 63 denied. Seasonal was 9-1, sales was 93-5. And then this is just kind of the percentage of, down at the bottom, where most of our work happened. So 39% of the applications that we reviewed with either approval or a denial was within long-term, both quals and requals, and then sales, 37%. So that's just giving you an idea of where a lot of our qualification specialist work goes towards. All right, so.
Can I have a question here?
Yep.
So the denials, is this because there's not availability or because they?
It's my next page.
Okay.
Great question.
All right, so denied application. So wanted to break this down just because even for when I was pulling this data together, there was a huge kind of like, whoa, this is a huge increase comparatively. So looking at this in terms of our denied applications, in total, 62 denied, 63 for tax credit, 1 for seasonal, and 5 for sales ownership, with a total of 131. Looking down at the bottom, I'm sorry it's a little small, but this is the denial reasons that could be included, or for why someone would have been denied, and that could be over income, not being able to prove full-time employment, being over the maximum occupancy, being under the minimum occupancy. That'd be for rentals. Obviously for sales, we don't have a minimum occupancy or maximum occupancy with regards to qualifications. Being unable to verify your income or assets, or an other category, which we use as a little bit of a catch-all right now, and that could include not replying to being offered a unit, missing a deadline to provide pay stubs, being offered another unit, or any combination of the ones listed above. So within long term, the majority of these were denied after the applicants failed to respond to deadlines, being asked to provide additional documentation. Previously, how we would function is we would move all of these applications into a need more info status, and so we were just creating a lot of extra, where did all these applications go? We weren't accounting for them of the time that our qualification specialists did look at them. And then they wouldn't respond. We'd give them a timeline and they either wouldn't provide a W-2 if that's what was asked, or if we said, hey, you listed this much in assets, can you please provide backup documentation so we can verify that, so we can make sure we right-size you into the category you were supposed to be in. So what we moved to during Q2 is, instead of leaving them in need more status until someone decided to come back, on that deadline that we provided, if they did not respond, we moved them into denied. Technically, they are denied because they did not provide all the requisite documentation. And if they were to go reapply, we'd ask them to start over. if this application had sat in need more info status for 3 months, we're not going to accept income and asset statements from 3 months ago. We want the most updated information. If they applied in February prior to filing taxes and then wanted to come back in May, we would need updated tax document information. So that is why we've decided to move into denying them. The second bullet point there, we did our qualification specialist did leave for another position, and so Cindy and Bethany were backfilling basically all of Q2 on that one, and we did hire our new qualification specialist on June 6th. So she is drinking from the fire hose still. There's a lot to learn on that one.
Just one question, what type of letter or response do people get to tell them they've been denied?
We have a email template that is built within HomeTrek, so upon hitting denied in terms of application status by whoever is reviewing, it auto-generates that email template.
But I'm wondering, does it tell them because you never turned in this information as was requested at the state? Or does it say you were over the income limits? Or, I mean, it just seems like I'd want to get a reason and more than just a denial letter.
So I can speak for the ones that are denied for over income or can't prove full-time employment.
Right.
Cindy or I have been in contact with them back and forth over multiple emails. So on top of the auto-generated email, there's usually an email that there is always an email that I send that says, I've had to deny your application because of X. You weren't able to provide the documentation that shows this. For those applications that we just never got anything. Maddie spends a lot of her time right now bothering people for documentation, and at a certain point it's, you want the housing, we shouldn't be having to bother you over and over again. Those don't get a specific reason why they've been denied, but it wouldn't be hard for them to figure out why, because we'd been asking for tax returns, for example, and they haven't provided tax returns or something like that.
I think this category is a little bit misleading. Because, initially when I looked at this, I wondered what was the reason for denial, right? What's the biggest reason? And I was looking for it in the worksheet as far as, was it income over, So, but when we put in kind of, I would call them withdrawn applications, right? Where you didn't get enough information or whatever else, eventually those are withdrawn. So calling those a denied application, they're just an incomplete application or withdrawn or something. And to have really good data, understanding where we are income-wise, whatever qualification you want to put on it, I think you've got to be able to tell a story here of what is it, 123 approved denied applications, 60 were denied. And so understanding why they were denied, to me, would be an important component of the data.
Yeah, and we're continuously updating what options do we have in HomeTrek for following data. I know I just added one for Bethany and one of her case options in a drop-down to clarify that. So that is, it is a ongoing process to continue to clarify the data. And that's where I wanted to make sure we spent some time looking at this, that it's not all of a sudden we had way more people denied. But if you're looking at it from the simplistic standpoint, they were not approved for the unit because they didn't respond or they didn't provide requisite information.
Sure.
That's a great point, John.
I really appreciate that you're including it so that we are seeing staff time and we're seeing volume, whether they did it right or not, or found another house or left the valley. 405 and a quarter, is that what something? We've been asking for demand, and so that's a good litmus test. I appreciate categorizing them differently, or else we go back to our communications and we're like, man, people don't understand the application process if that many people got it wrong, right? Are there also redundancies in these like withdrawn, denied? Did you fail to get your paperwork in, you got put in the denied category, something else came up, or you tried to get qualified again and failed again? That maybe is not 131 unique people.
Yeah, I don't have that data at my fingertips, but it's definitely something we could look at. So you're just saying we denied them in April.
Correct.
They also get denied in May.
Right.
Because they didn't provide everything. Did
So
they
like,
also get denied in June?
It might be helpful end of quarter to send out that mass email, you're out of the purgatory period, you've been denied essentially, so that you only count each person once and you can kind of ignore them for the 3 months that they're waiting. I don't know if that would help just with the numbers on that one.
And I don't think there's anything in our regulations that state that people can't continuously apply.
Well, I would think they would, you know, and I hope there is a sentence in that, like, you've been denied it, if it doesn't say why, and I do believe they could figure it out, like, to start your application process over, click here, kind of like, I would imagine that if someone thought they had housing, so they ignored all the things that you were trying to help them with, which is so frustrating, and then it fell through, they're gonna want to be qualified again, and they might be irresponsible again. Some people are irresponsible more than once.
I want to look at the tax credit as well, just because that is a high number as well. With regards to this, how our tax credit, which would be Truscott Phase 2 and Aspen Country Inn, those are the ones that are APCHA managed. Again, previously what would happen based on how our regulations are written is that they have to submit interest, and then from there our property managers look at who has the longest verified work history, and that's who we offer the unit to. What was happening previously is we would leave it and submit interest if we knew that they listed, hey, this is a 2-bedroom at this income cap and they're $60,000 over, we would just go automatically on to the next person. In this case, we're again trying to clean up that instead of leaving it in submit interest, we're moving it into denied and adding that denial reason. So it's not a full application. They did not pay the $35 for tax credit applications to go through. This is in the pre-application stage for tax credit. So this is just showcasing, again, what our property managers and our admins are looking at before we're even going through the qualification process for tax credit, because it is quite involved. Anything before I move on to my next one, because I think we're going to talk APCHA managed units with some turnover. So looking at APCHA managed units, oh, and sorry, forgot to say, if you want the full breakdown of applications, this is on page 5. These next 3 items come from pages 7 through 10. This is all about the specific APCHA managed units that we work with. We had an increase of 27 new or renewed leases here. We had 66 in Q2, and the vast majority of those, 40 of them, came during June. So again, looking at staff time, we had a huge chunk that happened within just 1 month of that quarter. Looking at the overall percentage of kind of how our inventory was moving in terms of new and renewed leases, about 20%, 19% had new or renewed leases. Not that unexpected. Marolt, we don't go through a individual lease process with the music associates during the summer. We have a contract with the music festival, and that's where we go through that. We do not qualify each individual music associate. That is under the umbrella of the contract that is signed with the music festival. But in Q3, if we have some move-ins, I think most of our move-ins are, is it September 1st? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, they might show up in there, depending on when it happens. We'll see an increase in those new renewed leases based on when that next seasonal need happens in terms of Marolt move-ins. With regards to move-outs, we had an increase of 94 move-outs. There's a little asterisk there, and I'll get to that in a moment. 28% of our inventory was moved out of, or in terms of whether they moved to a new unit or whether they moved out of their specific unit. This is just talking, did they leave the unit that they were currently in? That doesn't account for, did they also move to another unit? With that, we actually had 99 units that had a move-out case, and an increase of 94. Again, not unexpected. All of our Marolt leases end on April 30th, so we would expect to see a large increase during Q2. You might be wondering, hey, there's 100 units at Marolt. Why am I not seeing 100 plus of what we saw? Not every single Marolt unit is a seasonal unit. There are 5 that are used for transitional housing as well. Currently, I should say. Based on today's data.
That explains like the 8% gap between new leases and move-outs. Okay.
Correct. Yep. And again, with that, most of our move-outs happened in April, as that was the end of the lease for Marolt. We actually saw 0 move-outs in the month of June. And then looking at the last one, we did see a decrease in maintenance requests. We saw 10 less than we had previously. Most of our categories on page 10 of your packet saw a decrease. HVAC, plumbing, electrical, ground, exterior, common area, they all saw a decrease. Appliances, make-ready cases, and our other categories, kind of our catch-all for our maintenance team, saw an increase there. Make-ready, again, makes sense when we had all the move-outs that happened within Roll. Yeah.
you guys can roll your eyes at me if you want to, but I think
No, please.
another interesting thing data point for some of this, and probably for the for sale units too, is reason why of the move out, right? Do you guys track
I don't
that?
think I included it here. My apologies. If you look at the bottom of page 8, I do have move out reasons there. I'm sorry I didn't add those to the slide deck here.
Okay.
But those would include, they purchased a home, that was 2, and then 1 had a no longer in compliance with housing requirements, and then 96 were other. So 95 from Meroldt plus 1 that was another.
Okay. Okay.
My apologies for not adding
No,
that here. Thank you for
I think
catching that.
that's, and the goal, right, is for move, if you're gonna stick in the valley, is move from rental to ownership. So it'd be nice to have that number, it'd be nice moved out of the area, something, right, too.
Exit interviews, as it were.
Well, I mean.
Yeah.
We do ask
We close
that.
accounts and we ask, I like that data.
We do ask that when somebody's leaving, and we do ask that when somebody's selling as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to know kind of what's going on.
I agree.
All right, just looking at some percentages, kind of with in the mindset of leases and move-outs, just again to see, based on the 5 properties that we manage out of our 351 units, there's that 19% of new and renew, 28% of the move-outs, 95% were from Meroldt. Not unexpected with the end of the seasonal leases, and then Truscott one I just highlighted just as being, almost 50%. A quarter, or not a quarter, more than a quarter, more than a third actually, of T1 units that had a new renewed lease. All right, gonna go on to.
That helps us with staff time, but not necessarily residents, right? Like the difference between a new resident and a renewed. If most of those were renewed leases, then right.
Yeah,
new
we're not
people-
gonna.
yeah.
You're not gonna have the maintenance team involved, obviously, within a new renewed lease. But I do believe the lease signing process is about the same, regardless from new to renewal. It's just obviously there's a few more things on the move-in process. Getting
Right.
keys, getting.
Just combining those two helps me realize how much staff time it's taking. It just isn't helping me realize who's coming. If we have a flow, like if those are all new, that's a very different lifestyle, very different demographic change than if they were all renewed.
And
Which
just to
doesn't
let you
mean-
know,
yeah.
the assistant property manager that we had that really oversaw Meroldt, Mark Nussmeyer, did resign.
Oh, man.
We have promoted Nicole into that position, so she's the assistant property manager. I needed to bring that up for you. She is the new assistant
We're
property
proud.
manager. She has been doing a phenomenal job because the property manager, Julia Peralta, is on maternity leave. So she's been doing it, and she has a fairly new baby as well. So it's been a little crazy, yeah.
And I'm not saying that we need that data in the future, just I don't want to misconstrue anything. Like we got tons of new leases, like new people in, we got new people housed when we didn't, they were all renewals, for instance,
Got it. Okay.
Kept people.
Yes.
Retention's important.
We do a lot of them.
All right, next we're going to talk a little bit about some of the units that we managed that were up for that submit interest portion. So what we're looking at here is LIHTC 50 is Aspen Country Inn. There was 1 unit up during Q2, and it was a 1-bedroom, and we had 89 people submit interest on it. With T2, those are LIHTC 60. What that means is that LIHTC 50 is 50% AMI, LIHTC 60 is 60% AMI. We did have 2 units at Truscott for a total of 120 submit interest. I wanted to throw down here just for your information, and this is on page 9 as well, all of this. This is what our current income categories are. So for LIHTC 50, for a 1-bedroom, minimally a 1-person household, they could not make over a $38,700. And again, that is projected income that Cindy was speaking to. We can't, because it's tax credit property, we don't look only at the previous, we do have to project income. For the 2-bedrooms, they were both 2-bedrooms at T2, and we have had a hard time filling these. Minimum would be a 2-person household, and they couldn't make combined $56,400. Little asterisk note there is, as of July 8th, when I pulled this particular set of data, 2 of the 3 units that were listed have been offered and are going through the application process. So they have not finished as of today, but they are within that tax credit qualification process. And I meant to ask, do you know if all 3 have?
I actually talked to somebody today who might qualify.
Okay.
Believe me, we cross our fingers when we're getting these people, so.
That's not 90 people who qualified or 120 people who qualified. That's those who are
89
interested.
89 households or applicant groups that put submit interest.
And like we saw, a lot of those were denied pre-app.
Yep.
Okay.
Whether it was they listed they make $90,000 a year, or that they, for a 2-bedroom, listed just themselves.
Okay.
All right, going on to some sales and bid data. Kind of pulling through this. Go ahead.
Just 1/2 second. This is just such great information, and it's a lot to go through, but I was wondering if we could just make a more compact bit of the Truscott and the other city rental projects to be able to give to our other council members. Because this demand number is really a lot, and it's interesting to know how much the demand is. And I think it'd be good to be able to share with the rest of our council.
The only thing I'll say with that is I can provide APCHA managed data around that.
Yeah.
Because we go through the submit interest process. Something like a Centennial or a Castle Ridge.
No, I'm just talking about what we have.
What we manage.
And what we know from just that. I mean,
Okay.
it's likely these people are applying wherever they can. So, okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, looking at some sales data. This was if you go back to that page 4, this is going to have the updated information on that last bullet point, just in case you wanted to pencil in. I will send you an updated version as well. So we actually had 4 less listings. We did have a total of 5 in Q2, but we had 9 in Q1. So you're going to see some drops in total number of bids. Overall, we actually had 193 bids, which makes sense. We usually see 50 to 60 per lottery in terms of number of bids. Obviously, that will fluctuate based on demand, size of the unit, where it's located, but it checks out in terms of what we would be expecting. So our total number of bids here were 156. So 193 less, so that just shows you how many more bids we saw in Q1. We did see 3 less lotteries. We had 10 in Q1 and 7 in Q2. Out of those winners, again, all this data is in pages 11 through 18, but I'm trying to synthesize into a little bit more succinct information. Out of our winners in those 7 lotteries, 2 were current owners. Only one of them was an APCHA deed-restricted owner, and that was also our only in-complex bid that we had and our only in-complex winner out of all of the lotteries that we saw during Q2. The other 5 out of those 7 that we saw were all renters. 1 was an APCHA, 2 was an other deed restricted, so Snowmass possibly, or if it was Down Valley in one of their housing programs, and then 2 were free market renters that moved into deed restricted units. With regard to average work history, it did go down by 3 years. Not that unexpected. We did see less lotteries than we did in Q1, but we went from 17 years down to 14 years, but that was the average of the 7 winners with their household work history. And then Q2, in terms of our average sales price for Q2 for units that physically closed during Q2 was $618,860. Asterisk on that one. We did have 3 units that changed ownership over at Aspen Highlands Village that each sold for $1.2 million. Those are not ownership units. Those sold from one employer to another, but we do track their sales price. So I included them here, but I'm really sorry with how tiny that is. I didn't realize how small it was going to be. But what we did see is if I take those 3 units out of the units that closed, our average sales price of just ownership units was $516,306, which is a decrease from Q1 of about $90,000 in terms of average sales price.
Are those employee-owned units single units at 1.2 million?
The Aspen Highland Village units?
No. So they're like several apartments?
Multiple.
Oh, good.
That's much better.
And then just kind of not listed directly here, but just to give you an idea of how many units sold in what categories. We had 1 Category 1 unit close, 4 Category 2 units close. The 3 Category 3 units were the Aspen Highlands Village units. Those were the only Category 3 units that closed within Q2. 5 Category 4 units closed in Q2, 1 Category 5, and 6 RO. So when we're looking at this with average sales price, these aren't also just lottery prices. These are also the ones that can sell at what the market will bear at Aspen Village or at Smuggler. So if you look, I think it's on page 18, I did list out each individual unit out of those 20 that closed and what they sold for. And then looking a little bit more at sales data, this is bids by bedroom, category, and household size. Within this, our total bids that we had during Q2 was 156. 66 of those came for 1 unit. That was a 1-bedroom. 61 of those 156 were for 4 2-bedroom units. So we had just as many bids or more bids on 1 unit than we did have for 4 2-bedroom units. 29 bids for 2 3-bedroom units, and we had 0 studio units that came up for bidding during Q2, so there's our 0. So we can look at where the percentage of our bids are coming from. Again, this is driven based on what we have available. It's not going to say that Q3 is going to look exactly the same, but it's all dependent on what is up for bid at that point in time.
What category was the 1-bedroom that had 66 bids?
Let me take a look.
Probably Category 3. But
South Aspen Street. It was the 103 Dean Street. Do you know off the top of your head? I can look at it this way.
Category 4.
Category 4.
Category 4.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Oh.
And then looking at the next one, this is number of bids by category. Again, we can look that category 2, 3, 5, and RO all only had 1 unit that had a bidding period during Q2, whereas category 4 did have 3 units, so it had 96. More of the lion's share of the bidding had more units. Again, not that unexpected. With the last little graph there, this is number of bids by household size. So the first line is talking number of adults, second line is talking number of dependents, and the third line is talking number of bids. So what we can see is that in our 1 adult, 0 dependents, that was 46% of our 156 bids. And if we look at 2 adults, 0 dependents, that was 35% of our total number of bids. Again, based off this current information. Going back to the number of bedrooms, though, we only had 1 bedroom. Yeah. We had 4 2-bedrooms there. So we are seeing, just like we did in Q1, a very large share of households with 0 dependents in terms of bidding.
Rachel.
Yeah, just an observation. It seems that perhaps at the end of the year there should be, and you're probably counting on it, but looking at this in chunks quarter by quarter, it's very hard to see any trends or draw any real conclusions. I don't know if we can even do a year and a half at a time to see if there's real trend lines. But the one thing it does strike me, and you're absolutely right, it needs to be tempered by the fact there's only 1 bedroom had come up, of how many people are interested in a 1-bedroom. And yet those are the same units we're talking about potentially prioritizing for move 2 units. And those are the people who will not even get to bid. So there's a challenge there, that's all.
It is hard to read too much into the quarter, but for instance, I do think some of our government officials who are talking about things like childcare could look at this and see, even though only 1 bedroom came up, still the broadest categories were those without children. So these multi-bedroom units that we think we're building for families, still the number 1 category of people in this quarter who are looking for housing are not those with children. So there just might be some other things you can extrapolate. A year view would be much more beneficial.
Well, and I agree, but even extrapolating without saying what are the age of those people, We don't know. If everyone who is bidding on a one-bedroom is 23, they're likely to have kids, you know, but if everyone who bid on them is 60 or 54, they're not having new kids. So, you know, again, I can't extrapolate from less than complete information. And we don't ask the age, I don't think.
You could look at work history when you think about this too. If people that are, you know, getting priorities are working 14 to 17 years, they might be older.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Tried to be more succinct this time, but happy to go back to page by page if you'd prefer. Any questions for me or adjustments?
This is way more data than we had 5 years ago.
Yeah. Good work.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
And just to let you know, when somebody does fill out an application, on the application and the information at home address, we do ask their age,
Yeah.
so that we know. And so we can also figure out how many people are in like ownership units. That's how many we can find out that are over, that are retirement age.
Right.
So that information we can capture.
Yeah, again, so we can draw good conclusions.
Right, right.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, we will move to the discussion on the increase of AMI categories.
Okay, Cindy and I are gonna tag team this discussion. AMI is a complicated topic. And we tried to lay out the memo with kind of what is AMI, what are the benefits of it, some snapshot data on Colorado, and then kind of our rationale. We specifically are bringing this up because when we talked about the 120 to 150 increase for our rental requalifications, I don't want to put words in one of your mouth, but one of you said, well, what about new people? What about folks that are just trying to get in the system? Because this is only addressing our requals. And so this looks at the bigger picture and addresses both new applicants and those that are requalifying. What we did is we sat down and we looked at some data on, if you flip over to page 2 of my memo, do you want me to give an overview of AMI first? Would that be helpful, or did?
Part of it is for the public
Sure.
who's watching.
Okay, happy to do that. So area median income is published annually by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. We've spoken of them earlier in the meeting. They use the same method to calculate AMI for across the country. And it's basically AMI, or area median income, is the midpoint of a region's income distribution, meaning that half the households in the region make more and half make less than this number. And it's calculated based upon gross income. So that's the income that's received before taxes and other payroll deductions are taken out. So APCHA receives the new AMI once a year, usually in the spring, around May, and it goes into effect. We've been using AMI for a while now, 5 or 6 years. Why APCHA originally chose to use AMI is listed in section 2. It's highly reliable, it's trusted, and a readily available data source. It's updated annually by HUD. That increases fairness. It becomes consistent with CHA and other state programs, and it's also used by other communities around both the state, local communities, and then across the state. What we have found is since 2019, the AMI that's been published by HUD, both in 2020, 2021, and 2022, has gone down. So we are still using the 2019 AMI number, which we're allowed to do, because the numbers that came out said income decreased, which meant that our categories, our income caps, would have actually declined. We are allowed to maintain the number and not required to decrease. So we've been maintaining that 2019 data. Yes, Skippy.
Clarifying questions. When HUD is doing these AMI numbers, are they counting full-time, primary residents here who work remote as part of those, or does that count in the area where their salary is coming from?
Great question. I don't know the answer to. I'm certainly happy to dig into it and look.
I think it's reported,
Yeah,
I think it's reported where you live.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
IRS data, I'm sure.
Yeah, I would, that to me is a really critical element to sussing out how reflective AMI is, and they're gonna be imperfect, but like obviously median is better than mean.
Yeah.
But, the argument's been made, right? If the workforce, the higher end of the workforce isn't here, if they're excluded from that data set or included, it makes a big difference. So I would like to know that. And then it wasn't clear to me, are we talking about this just for new rental applicants or for ownership as well?
So this would apply for ownership as well as rental applicants and requalifications from a rental standpoint.
Okay, thank you.
So I think, Rachel, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've often talked about what some of the other surrounding counties are.
I love this. This is so helpful.
Oh, great.
I
I'm glad.
greatly appreciate this.
So on page 2, if you can scroll down, whoever's controlling the screen just slightly. Thank you, Nicole. That first chart under 3 is a snapshot of the other AMIs for our kind of surrounding counties. Pitkin's the third down at 108, Eagles above us at 111, 8, and Denver's at 117. I threw that one in just as a kind of reference point. Also in there is Summit below us, Garfield, San Juan, Mesa, and Delta. After looking at those, staff certainly believes that Pitkin County is the right number and not necessarily taking a kind of average of a couple counties makes sense. I think Pitkin County is the right number to be using to base our income and asset categories. So hopefully that part was helpful. And then we sat down and said, okay, what are we seeing? We're seeing increases in salaries in Pitkin County. Regardless of what HUD published, we're seeing it on the ground. We're seeing more and more people come in who just got raises, don't qualify for their housing anymore, and said, okay, what is the number that makes sense to look at to increase those income and asset categories? And so what we looked at is the 10% number. So currently, we use a household of 4 at 100% to set those income limits, and so the numbers are all based on that, what a household of 4 at 100% of AMI looks like. And so the first chart is our current 2022 max incomes, which again, these are the numbers from 2019 because the 2022 numbers that were issued were actually lower. And so we proposed a 10% one-time adjustment in our categories. So a category 1, currently we're at 50% AMI, a one-person household could make $38,700. We are saying that should actually be 60% AMI, and a one-person household should be at $42,570.
On this graph, are we missing just one column to the left? That's one-person household, two-person household, three-person. Is that how you read that?
Yes, I apologize.
Okay,
yeah, sorry. This is how we have it printed in the office.
No, I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly.
So, thank you, Allison. So as you go down, the household size increases, and I apologize for not making that clearer. So we're suggesting a one-time 10% AMI bump, which is reflected below. We experimented with other numbers. We didn't include them in this. We looked at 15, 25, and we felt like 10% was the right number. So you can see in the lower chart what those would look like. It's a jump. It's not in some cases not a significant, but a few $1,000s. So if we keep going, Nicole, down the next, and then I'm happy to go back and answer as many questions with Cindy. Help. So, so the next part is our wonderful home check data, and Andrew's still here to answer any questions that I might have. So the first set, we wanted to make sure we talked about, hey, who this would affect. So based on data pulled from June 28th, And this is for sales applications. So this is currently active sale applications. They may or may not be bidding, but they have an approved application. About 55 applications in our system would be adjusted. They'd be adjusted, 4 would be adjusted from RO to Category 5, 3 from Category 5 to Category 4. So that means in our system, those households would become a lower category.
Which wouldn't help the gentleman
Exactly.
that talked earlier.
Right.
That was here earlier.
And there really aren't Category 1 for sale units.
We have some, but there's very, 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 very few.
And very little turnover of those, I'd
Yes.
imagine.
Mhm.
Because I'm just thinking, all these people who got adjusted down to 1 can bid on a 2, but not a 3. And so it really affected.
It
who
affects
can-
those people more than anything.
Who can bid on things.
That was before I knew, I didn't know Jake was coming in, but that was when reading this, that was exactly what I was thinking about, was that.
And so that's something to consider, and that's why this is a very much introductory memo and one where we want direction about whether we should bring this back for a first reading, because this is a regulation change.
It's interesting though, when you go up category, there's far less people impacted. Is that because it's just a wider
It's a wider
income
band.
range?
It is.
Yeah. On top of this, data that's not included in this, there is a number of applications that were not adjusted down in category because assets pushed them over.
Yeah.
So it was not solely income that the adjustment. So this, again, is a snapshot of ownership, which is 55. There's currently 330, so that's 16%, roughly 16%. So the next then that Nicole just slid to, which is on page,
Sorry, you just said something that I hadn't really thought about before, but, okay, so say that there was a person in whatever, Category 3, this moves them down to Category 2, but their assets were Category 3, their assets haven't changed now.
They're
So they would
reclassified
still
Category
stay in
3.
Category
They'd stay
3,
in Category
because that's
3.
you take the higher of the
Correct.
two.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the next part is based upon data pulled on July 1st. This, page 9, this would affect 70 households with long-term applications, so rentals. So they are currently in a rental unit of ours. So 70 applications, which is roughly 14% of all applications, because there's 500. From a rental standpoint, this is actually beneficial because you just have to be below the rental category that you're in. So there is no effect such as Jake talked about earlier and what you just mentioned. Someone going from a Category 5 to a Category 4 that's in a Category 5 rental unit still still can stay in there. Now, we don't have any Category 5 rental units, so that was a bad example. But for example, a Category 3 unit, there's folks that go to Category 2. It doesn't matter. They can still stay in the unit. Their income and assets just have to be below.
Instead, they don't get kicked out.
They don't get
Correct.
kicked out.
Yeah.
So it's beneficial from that perspective. And so again, that's 14% of rental applications would, and it's really approved applications, would be affected, and about 16% of current sales applicants would be affected. Our final thing, and is just if we were to go down this path, we would certainly recommend reverting back from the 150 requalification point to the 120, because this 10% increase would cover that. So happy to turn it over to all of you and answer questions as best as we can.
I'm sure there's no questions.
Rachel.
Well, okay, sorry. Rachel.
Well, yeah, no, and this might be something just to contemplate as opposed to answering now. But I'm just looking a little bit at the jump that we use between the AMIs and wondering if there's any change in that might eliminate some of the problems of people not being able to bid in Category 1 is 60% of AMI, and then the next one's 95%, but then the next one's 140%, and then Category 2, it's going up a whole, Category 4, a whole 75% up to that one. And it's just not even jumps, and I don't know that it needs to be even jumps. or why the jumps are like this, but I'm just wondering if playing around with what percentage of AMI are allocated to the categories between those lower ones might make a difference, again, with people not being moved down to one in such a way that they can't bid on units they thought they were going to be bidding on last week.
And that's an interesting idea. I don't know if Cindy can speak to.
And I don't know if it'll help or not
Yeah.
help, so I think
Yeah.
you'll just have to play with it later.
And I'll be honest, we took what we currently had and it did a 10% adjustment, but I think it's worth looking at where, maybe historically, where these
Where or why.
percentages came from,
Yeah.
and then
And I think some of it came from when we decided to go to using AMI, we looked at what we currently had.
Right,
Where
and
did
then
they
matched
fit
it.
into that? And we tried as close as we could. The reason why Category 5 is such a pretty big jump from Category 4, Category 5, we got rid of Category 6
Oh,
and
no,
7.
I meant
So
from
we
3 to
had to
4
add those,
was
but yeah.
pretty high. I
Right.
didn't even look at the 5, but
Right.
no, I realize, and there's never a perfect system.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's good just to question each part of the formula.
I think that's a good point. I mean, I think we saw that in the data, right? 61 category 4, right? I mean, because of that, probably wide gap.
Yeah, this is a very basic question, so maybe I'm just being dense. But in the rentals, I understood the problem we're solving for is people are getting trapped in these units, and if they have to leave, then maybe there's nowhere else for them to go. For new applicants, though, I understand salaries have increased, but the purchase prices and the rental prices are the same, so the purchasing power has gone up. So I don't really understand what we're solving for here.
The complaints that we've been getting are, there are quite a few employers out there that have bought deed restricted units, and I'm not talking about where they own free.
Yeah.
They've actually bought units out there, and when they were built, because people got when they were first developed, the developer got better credit or a higher number when they had to go through the GMQS process for lower category units. There's an awful lot of Category 1 and Category 2 units, and they own these Category 1 or 2 units. Their employees are too high to even move into these units. So they can't even utilize these units for their employees. So that's one of the reasons that we started kind of looking at this as well. Is there anything that we can do to accommodate some of these employees, because their employees are making more money. And that was a lot, it was really across the board more than anything, is it seemed that was the case. These I just keep getting them confused, I'm sorry. The employers were paying their employees more money, and they just didn't have their units couldn't house their employees.
What subsection of the total number of units are those type of situations? It's a relatively small one, right?
it's becoming more and more frequent
Yeah.
that we're hearing from folks that just can't find tenants for these lower categories, and just like at Truscott T2, they can't find, and the units are sitting vacant for more than the 45 days, which is the allowable period, because we can't find a category.
Yeah.
Where does, I look at this data, and as a bank, we use different data to be measured for CRA, whatever else. And I was looking at it while you guys were talking. Those median incomes per household went up in the last 3 years, from 20, 21, and 22. Where does HUD get their data from? Because what I look at here to say Denver County has a higher AMI than Pitkin County is not intuitively what I would think. It's not intuitively what the data we use, the exam council uses as a bank. And then also, just to say that it went down in the last 3 years is to me, not an intuitive, doesn't make sense either, right?
It wasn't intuitive to us.
Where does HUD pull their data from?
I can do some
The
digging into
reliable
that.
data set.
Where did you say the banks get their data?
So I'm from the government, I'm here to help. But,
John, what data? Did you
we
say the
use,
banks?
and I had, it's
CRA?
called the
Federal?
Federal Financial Institutions Exam Council data, and I picked it up from my address, and it, it's less than this data here. It's $107,000 or $100,000, but
So they come up.
it's a smaller number, but it went up
Right.
You know, 2020 was 97, 2021 was 100, and so on and so forth. But it, to me, intuitively, when I look at that, I don't see incomes dropping when I review loan applications
Kelly?
either.
Can I just answer John's question? HUD gets their data from the American Community Survey, which I don't know who responds to, but that's where their data set comes from. So we can do some digging into that. But.
Good. Kelly?
Yeah, thanks. I guess for me, the reason why this isn't totally surprising or reductions aren't totally surprising is because, you know, it's sort of a picture of like our wage distributions, right? And we just have a lot of low wage jobs. And so the more low wage jobs you have, the more incomes you're going to add at the lower end of the spectrum, pulling the median that way. So that's how part of the way that I think about this. I think, you know, for me, this conversation is relevant for the rental qualifications, either new or requalifying, makes a bit more sense here because of like the flexibility to amend it over time as the economy shifts. You know, the wage increases people are getting, you know, they're isn't turning into money in the pocket right now, right? It's going out in inflationary costs, not necessarily just related to housing, because those are fixed by us, but, you know, for other things. I think where I start to, Dad, sorry, can you stop? Where I start to like think about the complications of this over time or for the ownership things, because people are gonna, you know, wages are gonna stay up even as inflation comes down. So we're just sort of skewing the housing affordability question even a little bit more in the ownership inventory, because now people will have kept their higher wages, still existing in this higher AMI, and, you know, but they're paying less for they have paid less for that unit that they now own. In real dollars. So I'm not sure that helps us with other problems we're also trying to solve for on ownership units. So I just want to maybe separate these a little bit, because without that conversation about like an affordability standard, particularly for ownership, it's harder for me to reconcile what this will do to that inventory. Thanks.
I appreciate that comment and to take a look at separating them and look at the pros and cons of potentially separating them. But I'm sitting here thinking anyone who wins a lottery and is going to buy a unit in the future is going to be paying a significantly higher interest rate than just a year ago, and will probably need that higher income to qualify for that unit. So there's the plus and the minus side on that. But I'm happy to take a look at it.
I think too, separating
Thanks.
it.
Yeah, and I do think it would be helpful when this gets brought back to also look at the distribution of our inventory by category, because it does trouble me a little bit about the question that I forget who brought it up earlier. You know, are we preventing people's ability to bid up? So I just need more clarity on that also.
Francie?
Yeah, in response to what you said, John, I was also confused about the county AMI list. I think if we were looking at the mean, Pitkin would be at the top, way above Denver. But I just think because it's the median, it changes how it looks. But, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm just going to go through a couple things. First of all, home track and data as part of this memo is so cool. Thank you so much for thinking of adding that, and just another gratefulness for that. I really appreciate this. I also thought a little bit of how this was mostly helping keep our rent, you know, when this first came up, helping keep our renters who have to requalify so frequently and get to stay in their house are not based on their income, unlike owners. So maybe we just focus the regulation change on renters for now, but I am also hearing from people who now their raise, especially a combined household, like to me, the category 5 is really the most important column when we come to ownership, because it's basically you can make under this or spend $3 million for a 400 square foot, lot Murphy bed apartment in Aspen. It's that gap between,
It's grown.
yeah.
Where it used to be.
Affordable housing.
That's one of the reasons
free
why
market.
we had category 4. We kept them closer from going from category 4 to free market. Now, you can't.
You can't.
It just goes way too high.
Right. So our category 5 people are looking at, and again, I'm thinking more of families that have changed, and so those are the people who are going to be wanting to buy a different ownership unit, couples, new kids, whatever it is that your life status has changed, and you are priced out of, like as a couple right now, if you both got raises a little bit over 100K, you can't buy, like you're out of category 5. So this would allow a 20 grand about difference in how much your raise was over these last couple of years as raises were spiking. I don't see my salary in that kind of room, but I'll talk to my boss about that. So who are we helping? And so to me, this is just basically a rant, but like the category 5 is the most important in that, with the caveat that of course, as we're bumping people down and telling them they can't bid up, that's a scary thing where we're trying to help one thing and then all the levers pull in different ways. My question, I guess, to myself is like, is 20 grand for that couple is, 238, now you can only make 233, I think maybe, oh no, I'm off one. 30 grand for a couple with a baby. Like those are pretty significant raise. I think 10% is the right mark, I guess, as you played around. Like that makes sense to me. I think we might still lose people whose family situations are changing, and there's just no such thing as going from Cat 5 to free market anymore. And so that's why that's an issue in the ownership side. If we wanted to take action, be more quick to help more people, I would say maybe separate these out if it comes back to a regulation change to focus on rentals first. I think that's an easier yes.
But we don't, Cat 5 doesn't go to free market. There's RO.
No, it goes to RO. But now ROs, a lot of ROs now are over 2 million. You're starting to see the North 40s going 2 million and more. So you are.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, no, they have. That's true.
Yeah.
I think the hard part, just to jump in about separating them out from rental to ownership, is we have a lot of folks that both live in our rental housing and actively bid.
Okay.
And so they could be a category 3 in one situation and a category 2 in another. And I think it would be confusing for both staff, making sure, and Home Track is great that Andrew's looking at me in fearful eyes about Home Track, but both Home Track and staff keeping the two numbers separated. But I understand the rationale, and I think maybe looking at a little bit of what Rachel talked about is why these percentages of AMI are associated with each category. Can we adjust for balancing the category 2s to 1s and whatnot?
I do want to get to that, but the regulation language could say like rental applications can be up to 10% above the category limit or something, so that it's not changing what category you're in, but there's an extra wiggle room as a renter, and maybe on requals. So that is also really interesting, those jumps. My understanding, if
We'll have to manage
I understood Cindy right, and kind of when we were getting, like, so we knew that most of our inventory, what we were trying to do was get the most, like if most of our inventory is Cat 3, we're trying to get most of our people into Cat 3, right? Like was that the initial reason?
I don't know if that was necessarily.
Okay. That is how I would
thinking on
suggest we play with this. So if we change these jumps, and somehow that gets tons of people into a category where actually that's our lowest inventory, unless we can start changing assigned categories of units. I would want to try and maximize people's access to housing, right? So I think that's like, there's a huge jumps because there's so many people and there's so many Cat 3 units, so we wanted to get as many people into Cat 3 as possible. If we made that jump smaller, then people wouldn't qualify for Cat 3 anymore. So to me, we have to match those jumps with the actual stock and what they're categorized as.
I was gonna say, I don't understand either, because we really don't have overwhelming vacancies in any category. So saying, let's change it so more people can just pick at that bucket when there's already no vacancies in that bucket. I don't know that that's a logical reason to do it.
So I'm going to use really simple math because that's all I can communicate in.
Just help me understand.
If we had 100 total units in APCHA's holdings and 70 of them were category 3, I would want like 70% of our applicants to be in cat 3, right? Or else, like, why would we put everyone else in fighting for the 30 remaining percent,
I know what you're saying, but on the same token, if you're really broadening that out to be big enough to capture 70%, you're saying that somebody at this end of the broad scale is going to really be paying more than this person who got in at the low end of that huge range. And you're saying this guy can make this little amount of much more money and pay 20% less rent than the guy on that end. I mean,
and rent is different. I think if all of our if every cat 3 unit that ever comes up for sale was always a fixed price, then that's a little scarier. But there are, there's quite a variation in sales price per category. So like people and their banks have to make that decision personally,
no,
like
I
whether they can
understand,
access
but you're still
that.
saying that let's broaden the pool so that somebody making the $100,000 a year can qualify for the same unit that only someone making 60 can. And they get to compete against each other because we want to make that category so broad. I don't know that that's equitable.
But if there's only 4 units that are cat 5, why would we make 50% of our, population in that category? They're never going to get a house that way, so I think it's just supply and demand.
I do see what you're saying, but I'm wondering, doesn't that push to say maybe we should be building more Cat 5 rather than trying to push those people back into the same sardine can with the rest of the Category 4s?
Yes, and I think these are extreme examples. I don't think we have that much of a split. I think factoring in availability could lead to a productive discussion about the AMI.
Yeah.
I thank you for clarifying. I do understand what you're saying now, and what I can hear and agree with is, in an idealized world, recognizing things change all the time, we would like to have relative mirroring of the workforce to the housing stock. The question that follows is how do you achieve that? And I think, kind of playing with these numbers is not the best tool to get there, because it creates a lot of other downstream complications around affordability, quality of life, fairness. But there are opportunities that we would have at this board in other ways to, change categories, which we've talked about, or build different things. And, maybe that's a better way to get at that goal.
Maybe part of it is that we are kind of
sense.
all of us spitballing it a little bit, and that's okay. This is an open discussion for those purposes to ask questions and point. But I had done a lottery presentation with the Rotary not long ago, and our staff, Chris Everson, said his last name wrong, prepared some information for me. So he had done a job growth by area medium income. From 2010 to 2019, 26% of the job growth was in Category 2, 55% was in Category 3, 7% was in Category 4, and there was 0% in Category 5, oddly enough, I don't know why, and 12% in RO. But in terms of where our job growth is really going now, it's Category 2s and 3s, and so we can pass this whole packet around or ask that it be forwarded.
You sent it to us, didn't you?
I did, I thought, but, so I don't know that we want to match to our inventory or we want to match to our job growth.
I would say
but here's what's funny about that, though. Sorry, I just want to jump in on this because, AMI and, represents the reality at a point in time.
Sure.
Right. Our category is artificial, because Category 3 does not have the same meaning across unit to unit, as connected to AMI. Like we have Category 3s that are very low cost and Category 3s that are very high cost. So, the actual ownership inventory is an artificial number that is really hard to equate back to these AMIs. So that's why it's a struggle for me when we're talking about this in ownership, because like for rent, you know, we can set the rental rates based on affordability, based on known incomes. We can look at wage distributions that are showing up in our population and bucket them proportionally across the AMI schedule. We cannot do that with our ownership unit categories. You know, they are not, the numbers are totally going to be all over the place and they're going to overlap each other. So that's why it's really tricky, I think, when we are trying to talk about this in terms of how we would adjust it for ownerships. So that's my problem here. I don't know how to end up doing this rationally for that. And it, again, I think just begs a little bit more of the question of like understanding what are our max resale values for our ownership units across all of these categories, because then we could really see what the spread is, and we can really have a conversation about what those need to be adjusted to either move them to a different category or, you know, buy them out and readjust the price or something. So that's, I don't know. This is tough for that, and those are the things that I think we need to talk about before we can make a decision on this.
So part of this, we've talked about income, but what about adjusting category?
Well, that's another tool, yeah.
You know, so category 1's 50% today. Do we adjust it? You know, do we make it a bigger percentage, 85% or something?
That's kind of what I was raising.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, which we've talked about
I
before.
think it'd be worth giving staff direction to play around with some of these numbers and take a look at it.
I would very much agree.
Percentage,
Isn't that what we're doing?
larger
Yeah,
percentages.
but just make it a
for one
larger,
category.
but make it a bigger piece of the pie. Because, you know, the scary part is the unintended consequences of kicking somebody up a category.
Or down a category.
Or, down a category.
Yeah, and if we were to adjust to 85% AMI, for example, in category 1, that would throw more people
into
category one. So it'd almost
Yeah,
be like
it'd be the same
holding
adjustment.
category 1 and then playing with the other, maybe holding category 1 and 2 and then playing with the others, in a sense.
I mean, you know, what I struggled with when we bought units, we mirrored APCHA's rental rates and categories, right? Category 1, I figured $700, whatever that rental was for a studio apartment, was a fair rent. Problem was you pay bank tellers, whatever else, are actually making category 2 wages today, right?
Right.
And so that jumped them up from $600-700 to a $900 or $1,000 rental unit.
Yeah.
And so some of it is that piece of the pie as well needs to be looked at.
The rental rates.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that we've talked around this issue a number of times, just with rising rates and difficulty filling lower category units. I would really like to see you guys look into that and you know, see what a higher AMI percentage in categories would look like, and would we want to keep the spread similar, or maybe there's less spread, as you said, between categories as well, so that, you know, kind of that stepping stone effect. I have no idea what the right answers are, but I think that is a tool that, for me, at first blush, diffuses some of the sort of engineering concerns I have around other tools of addressing this.
Okay.
I have a question for John. It's not exactly about this, but so if somebody is, I don't know, category 3, and they win the lottery, so they come to you for a loan, and they've qualified for category 3, do they have to go through the regular qualifications for a home
Well,
mortgage?
yeah, you got to qualify them for a
You
loan
have
to
to
make
meet
sure
the
they can
same
make
ones,
their
so
payments.
70%
I mean,
is.
today, when you underwrite to government, you know, the new Dodd-Frank guidelines, you're including HOA dues, you're including taxes, you're not adding a living expense, and you're using gross income pre-tax. But yeah, you're qualifying them, and then you may have conversations with people. Man, your HOA dues are fairly stiff. They're as much as your mortgage. Are you sure you want to do that? A lot of people, yeah, I need my housing. You know, they all want to have that housing nut figured out, and that's, you know, people stretch to get there. I mean, we all, at some point, we all stretch to get into housing somewhere. So
But your basic algorithm is still the same for free market and for affordable.
yeah.
You know, I know snow mass housing requires a pre-qualification letter from a bank to show how much you can qualify for. We have that in our regulations. We've never gone down that path of asking, because it's basically asking someone to go to a bank and get fully pre-qualified.
That's usually good for that day.
And it's
Before
good
they
for
even
one,
move
yeah, it's
in.
good for
Yeah.
a period
Well,
of
and
30
right,
days.
And so
Yeah.
a lot of banks, I've, they'll call and ask for employment verification 10 days before closing.
Yeah.
That changes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some of that stuff
And that's one of the
changes.
things we've told people, don't buy something big, don't go out and buy a car, do not change your job. Until after you've closed, because we've had a couple of people who the lender said, no, you changed
Or
this,
you
you
pull
did
credit,
this.
you pull
and-
credit
yeah.
10
You
days
bought
before
$30,000 worth of
When I
home
bought my Hunter
purchases.
Creek,
Credit the
they
day
told me
before.
I had to
Some
get rid
banks
of my
do.
car
We don't,
loan,
but-
and so I sold my car and bought the Hunter Creek, and after I closed, I flew down to Denver and bought a new car and drove it home.
Is it after you closed? Yeah.
That's how you do it.
And and honestly, the thing that we have not really looked at are rental rates and the maximum sales prices that we have right now. And it's been hard for us to try to get a grasp on this because we believe that there needs to be an affordability standard, and we don't have an affordability standard. We haven't had an affordability standard. So the rental rates itself have not changed since, I think when, I know the sales prices changed when we when we added category 5, 6, and 7. And we barely changed category 1 and 2. We did a bigger jump on category 3 and 4, and then we added 5, 6, and 7. And this was years ago.
Well, I mean, you're talking about rental rates, and
Yeah.
Matthew has it here, and exactly what I was talking about. Category 1, $531. You can make up to $38,000 a year, right? You make $40,000 a year, you're paying category 2, that's $947 a month. You make $60,000, $65,000, you're paying almost $1,500, $1,400, $1,500. And those are big jumps.
Yeah.
For just
Yeah.
More
going
than
over
a-
slightly over a
yeah, more than
category,
a
right?
category jump, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it tough for people.
And it's hard to figure out any other way unless you have a rental rate based upon that specific income.
And another
That
thing that
30%?
would be hard is if we finally do decide that some of these should be lower.
The pro forma on the project and the capital reserves
Yeah.
on the project.
Well,
and
not for
maintenance.
rentals, and because we deal now with so many different landlords and stuff out there that for them to change their rental rates down it just scares it just scares me. It just to say, well, now you can only charge this, but it would also affect
The pro
what the
forma
city
of how you're
yes,
maintaining the buildings.
exactly. Yep.
And repainting them and
Yeah,
recarpeting them.
because I know that we've run into that with ACI. ACI, because we on purpose kept the rental rates lower.
Right.
And we charge less than what we can charge from GAFA. We could charge more for our low-income housing tax credit, but we don't. Especially at ACI, we kept them lower because a lot of them are retired. And, of course, and we get asked that all the time by them.
And it was a
too.
senior
But yeah,
priority project.
Yeah.
Debt service can go up to 50 almost, all in.
I also don't know how you're gonna figure out, home prices in different categories, because that is a point in time price as well, right? When you go to, sell the house.
And the maximum price isn't based on what you could sell that for in the future, because the day you close on that, you're gaining appreciation, you're already over that price. So it's for newly deed restricted housing where they can sell it at that. So it's not.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Sorry, but back to if we're gonna do some affordability standards, on the ownership
Yeah.
side, and we wanna know what category 4, what the max sale price in category 4 is, or an average sale price in category 4. I mean, it's just so random, because if they're not for sale, how are you gonna say what price that house would sell for?
Well,
we
doesn't
have
how
that
many
in
times
Those
they've
charts,
turned?
they keep it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't how many times they've turned actually impact
Yeah, a
price
lot.
too,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, because it turns simple to compound effectively,
Right.
which works.
But we don't do
if you have-
compounded, it's
No,
done
nothing's
simple.
compounded.
No, I'm saying
It's
that
simple.
he was saying doesn't the number of
Yeah.
times it turns over matter after the sales price? And I said yes, because effectively
does.
it's turning a simple interest into a compound interest each time.
And somebody sticks
Because you
10,
reset the-
10%,
Right,
and then they're
you
doing their
reset it
improvements,
Right.
and
higher,
then-
but.
Yeah.
But I do think that the affordability is absolutely a piece of this conversation, to
Yeah.
set those categories.
I mean, well, and I think that one of the things we've got to be careful about is, you know, if you talk about an affordability standard and you talk about what a bank will lend at, and then, as you were talking about, right, I mean, you may have somebody that you go in, you would qualify for them for a loan, but that can be real uncomfortable. I mean, like,
Yeah.
you know, for some of these lower categories, you can qualify for a loan, but you're really going to have to watch your spending in order to qualify for it.
Oh, yeah.
If you apply that to some of these, if you apply that standard of what, you know, you can afford for qualifying for a loan to the rental categories, I think what you're going to see is rents go up
Oh, yeah.
pretty significantly.
I would think so.
Really significantly.
You know, you hate to even think about it, but it'd be wonderful if you could have a rent-to-buy program, or when people were renting, that, you know, you'd move out after 4 years, you earn $50 a month back or something, so that you could help them move or help them get into something. We don't have anything like that, obviously, but no, you're absolutely right. I mean, and we can't ignore what interest rates may do. It's nice to say when inflation comes back under control, but I lived through the Carter years. You know, I was a real estate agent then, and, you know, trying to hook people up with a 16% mortgage, a 12% mortgage, not a lot of fun. And so when you talk about affordability being a point in time, it's a point in time depending on what mortgage payment they have to get, or whether they develop enough equity and savings to refinance when rates drop in 5 years or 6 years, and they haven't added new debt or a child that they won't qualify for.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors.
Hey, I thought I had a great
So we got
mortgage.
this one
My
worked
first
out.
mortgage, it was 7.25%, so.
8. I got an 8. I know.
Well,
And I also got a roommate about 1 month after moving in, because I realized that monthly payment was keeping me up at night, and I couldn't sleep. And 3 nights of having the exact same nightmare, I said, "What is this?" And it said, "It's my mortgage." And we created a day bed in the living room, and we had a roommate in that 2-bedroom, my son and I, from then on out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Allison talked about pulling one wrench and pulling some more. I've got one here. So, looking at the increase from current to proposed, so, right? So we were currently you're in a unit. You're trying to requalify later this year. You're looking at it. You're 20, or say you're 35% over the current category, right? So you're not going to requalify. Then the APCHA board comes in and, right, we change that to be 150% for requalification. Then now we're talking about increasing the categories, and then I think I saw in here potentially resetting back to the
120%.
to the 120%. So the net impact to that is going to be, right, we told somebody we're going to increase so you can requalify, and then now we're going to come back and decrease. And so I guess just pointing that out, is that sort of yo-yo, is that something we want to?
I thought Bethany said that the 10% would cover that increase that was
It
made.
will cover the majority of what we're seeing. It's not, but there's about a 20, I'm not doing the math, maybe
Yeah.
15%.
15. So it's about a 35%. So if you wanted to keep it kind of in line at 150, you would use this proposed income and then go to 35% over, and that would keep you. I've done it on 4 different just random boxes, and it lines up pretty close on all of
So
those.
135%
So you would
instead
say
of 110?
135% instead of 120. If
Instead of 120.
again, I'm not
If the
saying
other
that that's
change
what we should
happens.
do. I'm just saying, right, it's something to be aware of as we make the changes.
The one thing our council members have asked us is that if we're giving this allowance for higher income, are they paying a higher rent? Or are they staying at the rent as if they're still earning this 90% of the category, and now we're giving them up to 150% of the category, but we haven't raised the rent?
Are we sliding that category?
And I,
We
you know,
don't. That's a logistic nightmare for us.
You know,
well, it is,
Honestly.
but it's also, again, back to
who do they pay to
an
rent
equity
to?
question.
Does it go to
But
the private?
is it worth it? Is it worth doing that for the smaller amount of, I don't think that there's a ton of people that fit that.
Yeah, again, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
our fellow council members asked, well,
Well,
if
no,
you're
that's more of a
allowing people
fairness
to
thing,
have
right?
far
Right.
greater income than they used to have for the same unit, are you charging higher rent? Because we have general fund contributed to
Right.
the upkeep of those rentals, rather than them paying for themselves. So it's just a question people have asked.
And these
Fair
folks are
question.
allowed to requalify at that higher amount for 1 year. And
Right.
if they haven't come back into compliance, which is basically they haven't lost their job or have no more income, then they can stay in the unit. If not,
Yeah.
they have to move out. So
Well-
it's buying them about 12 months to hopefully find other housing.
Of which there is none.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but again, I'm just maybe saying this as we look
never said it.
forward, because if we're going to continue to do this sort of thing, and we may need to for a lot of reasons, I want better equity within the rent. You know, I mean, we should be able to figure out a system if we're giving, because we may repeat this process next year and the year after, and that's what I'm looking to, not,
to me, that
not to go
seems-
backwards right now, but
I think someone who just got a raise, maybe that just got them to the affordability standard though. Maybe they are finally only paying a third of their salary. So to say they're still paying that low amount, I mean, we don't know that I don't think they're taking advantage of it. If so, if all of a sudden they're making a higher salary, they get to keep their same rent, maybe they're just shopping in town more and you get the sales tax instead. You know, I think I don't think we need to recoup this. I don't think it's an unfair trick that they're playing. Like we got to keep the employee.
I'm
we
not
gotta,
saying it's
like,
an unfair trick, but, you know, should somebody be able to pay only 25% of their income while their next door neighbor is paying 35?
I mean, that's happening. Because not everyone in the category makes the same amount of money, so it's already happening.
In the rentals, though, but we're now saying you can be even more above the lowest people in your category, and you'll get the same rent as people earning $20,000, $30,000 a year less than you, and that's how APCHA operates. I'd rather lower the rent for the other people too, than say you can earn well above our limits and it's okay and we're not going to charge you a penny more. But your neighbor who you know, we're not going to lower their rent with this I can't see that. It's just
The person who is all of a sudden feeling unfair because their neighbor is earning more, they didn't get preyed upon. They're not faced something new that they didn't already agree to.
it would be perpetuating and choosing to perpetuate a inequity for those who earn more. And those who earn more get more. And that's, you know, we have to do more Category 5s because they don't want to buy mobile homes, you know, that are our main Category 5 income. I don't know, you know, the lower worker, I think, deserves something and is probably more likely to be paying a higher percentage of their income.
And we can look to see how many people that will fit. And what that 150% does is it does allow that person to then stay in that unit and not have to move. If they go over that 150%, they have 1 year to come back into compliance or find another place to live. And again, we did that because we had these people who were totally freaking out because there was no place to move. But I understand what you're saying. I think what we need to do is I think we can find out how many households this would affect. And then if they are higher, then I think we need to decide on whether that's the direction that you want to do. And I know that that's going to be a logistic nightmare for a home trip right now.
Assigned to the unit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the goal is to not have somebody have to move out because they earn
Exactly.
more money at some point. But also that should be punitive too, right? So you've got a clock now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? It's ticking. And so you're getting the benefit of the category rent that you're living in today, but you know you're making more money. And next year, if you're still making the same amount of money, you're gonna have to move.
No, we allow them to
2
stay
years.
there.
This is where they're getting 2 years.
So they get
2 years worth
We
of.
raised the
More than
rent.
150, then they have a year. But
then
if
they
they're
have a year.
under that 150,
They'll stay
then they
for a
can
long
stay
time.
indefinitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if we raise the rent, we might avoid their having to move out. That would be the advantage of raising the rent as
Yeah.
they get more
But
income.
the problem, then you've
It
got a
keeps them
sliding scale of units you've categorized, right? That's
And I
certain
think
categories.
one of the reasons-
It's a problem, but-
Can we investigate whether we can change unit categories to a Category 5, or whether it was in the original entitlements for the building, or would it take a land use code change to do that? But the idea of having some flexibility in the unit category based on the person's income would be an easier way to solve that. And if someone is really now a Category 5 income and we don't have Category 5 rentals, can we create some of those out of our our existing inventory.
And the concern that I think the Housing Authority had, because I think that this was something that we looked at. And I think it actually, I don't know if it's in the regulations, but I think at one point in time it was that if you're higher than that category for that year, we can charge the higher rent. I think the reason why we didn't go that way is because we were afraid that there would be some property managers out there that would do their best to get a higher person in there so they could charge more rent.
Right.
And that's what I think was the concern. That's why we kept the rent the same as the category.
Okay.
Now, whether that's logical or not, I can understand what you're saying as well, but that I believe was the logic behind keeping the rent the same as that category, is because you're not going to get any more rent just because this person makes a little bit more. So we still want the proper category person in there if we possibly can get them.
Okay. How much annual increase in salary will this allow? I mean, if someone's already at top of 4 and we go up, what is the increase in salary that we're anticipating or that we're,
I think that's something that we'll have to.
The annual increase in salary? I mean, I think it depends. I don't think we can predict it either.
Well, no, but I mean, you're saying that the top of the category is this now, and it'll go up to that. That should tell us what that income is.
So that's 10%. I mean,
Well,
under
no,
current.
No, if it's
140 to
50, so if the,
Yeah.
if the category is 100,
Yeah.
it's 150.
It's 150.
Well, I know, but that's what I'm trying to, and if 150 would be what? If it's salary? I'm sorry, I can't
If it
train.
was salary.
Yeah, I'm just trying to say,
$2,000 a month.
they could have 50% higher salary than they'd had before and pay the same rent for 2 years.
Potentially indefinitely if they stay right below that 150.
Indefinitely, because we don't have a Category 5 to move them into, and we can't assess a Category 5 rent on a higher income, or we don't.
They can't have a 150% increase in salary.
That's
not what we're saying.
No.
They can re-qualify at 150% of the category.
Right.
So under current, if it's a Category 3 one person and it's 100,600 is current category, they could re-qualify at basically 150,000.
That's what I'm talking about.
Just $2,000 a
That's
month.
real money.
It is.
To say, oh, it's a little more to spend in town, it's real money. And whenever money comes out of our other funds to repair units, it comes away from production of new funds, of new units. That's why you have to watch the dollars. It comes from production.
And I think you just see from a dollar standpoint, right? Because you're using a percentage, the higher categories see way wider swing, right? I mean, Category 4, 3 people, it's $100,000, where, Category 2, it's 40.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation. I don't have the answers.
The different categories.
But, there is an issue there.
There is.
So, good conversation. This is
How do we wrap this up?
about as
It's totally clear.
about as clear
Any
as mud.
specific
What are you
direction?
learning
I know that you
from
want
us?
us to bring back.
Adjustment of different
ones.
AMI categories
We
and
could-
looking at
yeah.
that.
We can do different, maybe instead of
different
flat
models.
10 all the way
Yeah.
across, we can maybe
Yeah.
do a little bit different
You do
and
this,
see where we
this
can come
happens.
up with
If we
that
do
as
this, this
well.
happens.
Then we can work with Andrew to look at how many households that affects and both rental and ownership, or rental
Well,
and ownership.
and I think it would be worth a look and maybe a discussion among the board about should any units that are Category 4, that currently have people hitting this level, can we adjust them to a Category 5? Because we're not the landlords who are going to try to get higher income people in, and we could only do it for this circumstance of existing tenants whose income rises. And have a discussion about that. Can we create some Category 5s out of what we have?
That would eliminate the issue
rental.
that Cindy was
For rental,
talking
yeah.
about, right? I mean, because then you would have to be looking for someone who
Yeah.
has the income, can qualify, and then is going to re-qualify, right? So you kind of eliminate that issue of selecting for higher.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And, there's been a concept before when it was of a potential of private sector buying into a project and funding a project and being part of a project, and it became, well, what if you have a vacancy, or and the concept was that, well, that business owner would get the next unit that comes up. He wouldn't necessarily own 1A. And it's just that, okay, I didn't have anybody from my unit this year, somebody else got it, but now the next unit that comes up I use. I mean, it's just more of an interchangeability of the units within a complex, and they're all roughly the same size, the same thing at a place like Truscott. So I'd love to see if we can do something like that.
Yeah, and I think this has brought up a lot of, so we've talked about if we do make these changes, what's going to be the impact, how many people are impacted, and I think it makes sense to have that discussion about the going one up and one down, right? I mean, just because the impact that it's having, if we're moving people from category 3 to category 2.
Right.
Right.
I mean, can you grandfather in existing people and have these for future?
And I think that's it. And I think the end complex thing does grandfather people in because they're not in there. I don't know.
And I think we can look at in complex too bidding versus just across the board,
Yeah.
whether that's something that we want to look at.
I mean, because the other thing that I'm thinking about, right, is if you had somebody in a category, in a 2-bedroom, so if you had 2 people in a 2-bedroom, and then they were category 3, but then they had 3 kids, they would be category 2. So now you're basically saying because you have kids, you can't now have an in complex, right? Because having kids could change their category.
As your household grows, yes, the money grows, but it can push you down as well.
It can push you down into a lower category.
Right. That's a lot of kids in a short time, but no, I mean, it can happen.
If you're living in a 1-bedroom with 2 or 3 kids,
There is one thing about the people who make more money in the rental units, 30% for them or a third for them leaves them with a lot more money than the person who has less and pays a third of his income. There's a lot of disparity there. I mean, if you're taking a third of $9,000 a month, you have $6,000 left over. If you're taking a third of $3,000 a month, you only have $1,000 left over. So, yes, thank you. So it's there's something about the rent. I don't know. There's just a disparity in that just sort of bothers me.
How many units are rented? Because a lot of these units are probably employers renting to employees, right? How many are actually people that's part of their income stream from the building they own? I mean, I know there's a few in town in the core.
I'm not sure. I'm not really sure.
I mean, what percentage of that? Because as an employer,
Like
you're renting to an employee. I like to see the rent more affordable, right?
And they have the right to do that.
As a free market somebody,
Oh.
you want the income stream. You want a little, $100 more a month or something, whatever it is.
It all would depend on their land use approvals and whether they were required to deed restrict this as some sort of mitigation or something like that, or whether they just bought a free market unit, like the Aspen Times had done for years, and charged what they wanted to charge and then sold them off when they sold the paper. So there are a lot of employers who've done that, and we don't and can't and shouldn't affect what a private transaction is about. But there are others that are deed restricted in some way.
Well, as an employer, there's some concern that if you're renting below market, is that a benefit to that employee, and should that be a taxed benefit, a taxable benefit, right? And so that's what we did. We used APCHA as our gold standard and said, this is what the affordable housing market rents at. So that's our defense if you ever get audited and the IRS says, well, that employee got this benefit of, because free market on a studio apartment's $3,000 probably.
That's
and you're renting it for $900 or $500. So over the course of a year, that's a lot of money, a lot of difference, and that's a taxable benefit. So that's where I'm saying is, you want to have something to fall back on as an employer, just in case something like that happens. Probably unlikely, but
that was a great point.
That was a really good example. Does it affect their salary? Does it add into their salary?
No, I mean,
You keep
try
them
to
separate.
At least we did. We tried to set kind of a standard for all employees, and then if you got housing figured out, you know, it was market rent something, which is affordable housing market rent.
Kelly.
Kelly's got her hand up. We're approaching 6:30 here, so Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just want to sort of point out that it seems to me, again, just looking at sort of the ownership situation, that the category assignment really is of time limited relevance. It is something that helps with the project pro forma, right? It can get adjusted even in the context of a project. I mean, I think that's what happened at Burlingame too. They had to be shifted because they couldn't sell them at the higher categories that originally were desired. So I just want to point out, like, we could look at this just very differently. I mean, you could do category, you could assign costs based on someone's salary, and the qualification is less relevant on their income as it is for, say, work history, or something like that. So I just wonder if we need to just be looking at this differently. This feels like a lot of social engineering, and it just, to me, is like, gosh, this is one of those things you pull one thread and it is going to manifest down the line that we are not going to accurately foretell. So that's how I'm feeling about this conversation with regards to the ownership, and like, maybe we just need to really take a step back and look at it totally differently, because you can, affordability, the bank usually is going to ultimately decide what somebody's affordability is. We could have a totally different priority on how these units get won and assigned.
Yeah, I hear that.
So can I reiterate this proposal, our biggest reservations, I think, along with, so if we were to do what is on the board today, the drawbacks include people not being able to bid on categories that would come available because they got bumped down. What are some other drawbacks to, like, as presented?
I think there would be, arguably there would be a misalignment, a new misalignment, or a further misalignment, depending on where you think we started, of income to price.
It would be more affordable all of a sudden.
Yeah.
That's a drawback?
Well, I
Could be
think
perceived as such.
Yeah, I mean, it's a robust discussion. I think we could go until 10 o'clock tonight.
It's not.
I just want to make sure I completely understand what, like, I know there was a lot of good discussion that came out of it,
Yeah,
but
so I think on this particular, and
Yes.
please jump in, but I think, we talked about the things that you mentioned. We talked about, the impact to the requalifications. What other drawbacks?
I think the big one was the unintended consequence to limit, which I think is an important, I can't remember the kid's name, Jake's name, but, as a fairness thing, allowing
Right.
people to bid on categories, affordability was another important thing. I like the fact that we have limited, you can only bid up one category, but that's an unintended consequence here that kicks people down. To me, that's the biggest concern.
Yeah.
And then what you talked about, requalifications, that not going back to 125, but going to like a 135 or some
Right.
number.
Or 125 or whatever the number is, but
Agree with that.
Clear enough?
And I think we should have that in-complex conversation
yeah,
related to bidding up a unit or not.
yeah. I
Would
think
you like to see that the next meeting?
we can.
I don't know what else you have on your agenda, but I'm just saying at some point, it would be a
I
good.
think the next one with the regulation change, so we've got the discussion on buying property and putting a temporary deed restriction in place. I think that could be a regulation discussion all at once.
Okay. We might have a couple others for you if you're asking for
When
those.
is
Okay.
the next meeting?
August
August 17th.
Long time away.
Would you,
All right, so with that, we're over here. We'll move to Board of Directors comments, and we'll start with Kelly.
All right, thanks. Yeah, gosh, there's just some things that I've been thinking about recently, and I'm wondering if I want to go back to the notion of kind of collecting better data about what, who's occupying our inventories. And I know we've had heated conversations about this in the past, but I do think it could be really helpful to understand what people's income and jobs are, that just to have a sense, like a better sense, I think, of even our local economy, of what jobs are being housed in APCHA's inventory. And I recognize, and I'm very sensitive to the concern that information can get used and abused. And so I've been trying to think if there's ways that we can do this in an aggregated way or in an anonymous way, so that we can collect this this information from people without having it directly tie back to who they are, whether that's through kind of hiring a third party to conduct this type of survey, whether we tie it to kind of the biannual requalification process, that for someone to kind of be checked off as having fully requalified, that there's an anonymous way to provide that information back to us, I think would be really helpful. Because, I just am, I'm sure you all are hearing it, but I'm hearing it as well, just as much as the problems we are continuing to have justifying new housing. I think it would be really helpful for us to know that, and I think there's a way we can do it while also guarding against some abuse of information. So that is something. And, I just also, I feel like we need to have more conversations about, when we're looking at work plan, about really kind of continuing to build community trust in the program, and whether that's education around the program. But, I think we have a problem. I think we have an image problem at APCHA, and I think we need to make more of a concerted effort related to the value to the community that this administration is bringing. And this isn't, for me, just a few, squeaky wheels. I'm hearing it more and more often. I'm hearing it from people I find very unexpected. And so I think we have to just really, take a deep dive into that, because this program is really important to me. I think it brings a ton of value, and I really want to work through and resolve. I have people coming up to me saying, we're going to present APCHA with a, tenant's bill of rights because you guys we're not being treated well. Things like that, and those are very confrontational conversations, and I think they merit attention. So those are two issues that are, I think we have to really pay close attention to, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thanks, Kelly. Rachel?
We had a joint city-county housing meeting last night. Last night.
Jeez.
And the concept of job prioritization came up from Greg Poshman in terms of asking, do we really need realtors in our affordable housing program, or how many do we need, and should we start categorizing? And you actually used the word assigning units a little while ago, Kelly, when you were talking, qualifying and assigning. And I'm very concerned about this slippery slope of prioritizing job types, and that you can only get into units if you work certain types of jobs. And it's been brought up to me as well that, well, maybe people who work in graphic arts don't need housing because you can buy these services online. And other than real in-depth big mortgages, you can do a lot of your personal banking online. And you can do a lot of your accounting work online with online services. And does APCHA or Aspen or Pitkin County quote, need to house certain types of jobs. And I find the questioning of where people are working and putting down their job types the first step to doing that. And I'm very discouraged to hear that that's the way we answer the questions that are raised, beyond the fact that people requalify every year, that they have neighbors who call in all the time to say, I do or don't think that they're working enough. I can't say that I don't want to start the class warfare of whether we should house the U.S. Postal Service workers as an essential service, and then all the electricians, and then maybe plumbers up at this end of the valley would be nice, and then these people and those people, and start assigning point values as to whether a sheriff's deputy is as important as a police officer, is as important as a child care worker. And I'm very concerned that that is the direction that a lot of people would like to take the APCHA program, and this just really bleeds into it. And I don't know anyone who works in this town who doesn't work their butt off. And the message that's going out continually by certain columnists and some electeds is that the people who are in the housing now aren't the right people, and they're just not working enough. And that's why we have a labor shortage. And I would strongly object to starting to ask people, where do they work? Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks, Rachel. I do want to reply to you because let's clarify something. When I talk about assigning units, we talk very frequently about assigning category numbers to units and have had conversations about reassigning what those categories are based on maximum sales price, et cetera. So please do not mistake that conversation for anything about job assignments or anything like that. So, you know, and I do understand your concern, and I do not want that kind of class warfare. I want to prevent a slippery slope. I think there is valid information about our economy that we can understand. I think there's valid information about income levels in our housing units that we can understand that would come from this type of review. And that's why it would be, for me, at utmost, that this would be anonymized, aggregated information, rather than what I think you're leading to or fearful of the abuse of. And I share that fear.
Yeah, at last night's meeting, Greg used the term he fears and doesn't trust APCHA, and he recognizes that. I really fear and don't trust the position he's coming from. Thank you.
Allison.
I got you. I'm not here as a mouthpiece for Greg. He and I very much disagree on a lot of these topics. However, I do think that there is some real concern, and the other things that I've raised with regards to people feeling like they need more protection, you know, as tenants or owners, I think is really valid that for us to consider and dive into. It's not something that I think we should ignore.
I do think it's good that that joint work session happened last night, or else I'd probably have inappropriate comments to say tonight, but I think there was some really good clearing up of previous quotes and comments and objectives by both of those government bodies that put me slightly more at ease. Since we're on the topic, we did hear, you know, an elected official, a county commissioner, say that APCHA is not trustworthy, or that the sense is that APCHA is not trustworthy. This is not a new focus. Before I was on the board, there's been top priorities of APCHA, and communication and transparency, I believe, has been like a top year goal for the last several years. So it's not that we don't know that. What I'm finding is the misunderstanding or gray areas of what people mean when they say APCHA. So do they mean the APCHA board? Because county commissioners have 2 representatives on the APCHA board. So to say, I don't trust APCHA, Francie, you noted maybe there is better reporting that could come back from, when you do your board reports, but like you're on APCHA essentially, Mr. Commissioner. Like, what do you mean you don't trust yourself? Do you mean my house is falling apart and my like they won't fix it for me? That's APCHA. Where you live, your understanding of APCHA or of your home is APCHA for some people. It's staff for some people, that when I go into the APCHA office, here's how I feel or how I interact. So I think that is hard. I think a communication directive would be to really explain, I guess, the role of the APCHA board and what it can and cannot do. We were told at the beginning of this meeting not to speak to members of the public who have a compliance case that want to come up and talk to us about it. And that's really hard for me to hear because I think that's my role is if someone feels stuck or if someone feels like they need to be represented at the public meetings, that they have someone who's the citizen who's like them who they come talk to. I absolutely understand the legality of promising or pre-deciding something that I might be here, but to not speak to people who have issues with their case. And what I always say is come to public comment. That I don't promise them anything. I don't, but so even that feels like there's these varying degrees. So if you really can't go to your APCHA board members when you have an issue with APCHA staff, then where do you go? I think there needs to be outlets for public comment that you have to let people know ahead of time. I think there's things that we could strip away that, yes, being part of a public servant is dealing with the public, and the public is a range of personalities and opinions and frustration. But I think just keeping that as open as possible would help with some of that trust and transparency and really explaining, the board is not taking on individual compliance cases. So you think the APCHA board did something to you, we probably didn't. I couldn't help if I wanted to. The APCHA board is not going to be deciding on new developments being assigned to Aspen only workforce if things like that come up. APCHA, we don't get a say on any of that. So I think just even the definition. So when people blanket say something about APCHA, little by little, as the community understands better, do you mean the city department? Do you mean your leak in your tub? Or do you mean the board, the citizens, and the government officials who are representing you on regulation discussions? I do apologize because I think the fewer meetings means that we will go longer with them, and I get my bullet point list for the next meeting, and it grows as the weeks go on. So let me take it through this list. I want to say a big thank you and congratulations to our two APCHA candidates who did go speak in front of that joint commission yesterday. So we have two interested citizens, an incumbent and another interested citizen in serving on this board. The Aspen citizens, the citizen representatives on APCHA are not part of the decision making as to which citizen representatives are on APCHA, but I have some of you here listening, and I do think that anyone who's willing to give their time to something like this is so admirable, and it might work out that we do kind of have two candidates and two open seats now, and I wanted to also say thank you to David, who's not going to serve on the board any longer, but ideally that those people who have invested are willing to invest their time in something so complicated get, I guess, rewarded with the chance to do that would be my 2 cents, having not been asked. Okay. The order of operations, of just even how we do our board meetings. I know board of directors comments come last, so I feel bad that Robin's probably not listening to me anymore. And I don't want to go tit for tat during public comment. But I do just want to express empathy with the feeling of frustration that there's people in the system who are short-term renting their housing, their APCHA housing. That is, to me, a cardinal sin. And so I understand and empathize with the fear that is happening anywhere. So that is just kind of an aside. I know compliance cases could come to the board. I might need to read our regulations to remember what it would take for something to actually come up to us, or if there could be a quick refresher. But that we don't in general. That was very concertedly taken out of the board's purview. So just again, as like public knowledge of who can do what when you mean APCHA, APCHA board is probably not going to solve your compliance case for you.
You seem to be confusing a little bit of like a complaint or an issue and an actual compliance case. A compliance case is when someone's being investigated, and we may sit as a judge and jury on that in the future, and that's why we cannot have an ex parte conversation, anything that could be said separately that would influence your decision. But if someone has a complaint about staff or treatment, or they thought the lottery wasn't fair, they can talk to you all day, and you can bring that here. It's just separating the two of when you have to sit in a position of judgment as a judge. And just like any other judge, you have to keep yourself removed from that.
Thank you. I want to make a couple comments about some of the housing discussion that happened last night. I think it's wrong for us to talk about new affordable housing as growth or adding to the community, and especially that anyone who lives in there would then detract from those who are already here. I think that new affordable housing closer to work probably doesn't bring anyone to the valley. I think it just brings them closer to work, which brings the quality of life up. And that's what I think ultimately we're trying to do, is increase the quality of life for our workforce and our residents. And so I don't like that term being used as new growth. I also want to point out that people who come into Aspen to work include 400 county employees who are providing services for all residents of the county, includes hospital, emergency room and physical therapy, includes journalists and public radio reporters, perhaps, who are serving the entire county. So I think that was cleared up, but I want to go on the record too for saying housing is not an Aspen problem, and the people who work in Aspen are not only serving Aspenites. And so I hope that we never get to the point where we are, as our city council members have said before, like taking our toys and going to the other side of the sandbox as a citizen, watching kind of all of that play out over the last few weeks. Okay, and that was a good presentation on the data. I was interested to see that there was only one in-complex bid. I know that's come up, changing some of those rules, because it doesn't seem like it's that big of an issue, at least in Q2. It's not like every one of those went up. Someone in the complex wanted that unit. I am interested to talk about in-complex bids as they pertain to the category bid up issue that we heard today. But to me, it just reinforced that isn't a big enough issue to create a whole regulation change around. Thanks, guys. This is a lot of ranting. And so I will be quiet now.
Yield the floor. Thank you.
I want to point out that when I came on the board 19 months ago, the main topic of conversation was how to communicate with the public better about what APCHA does and who we are, and try to dispel the distrust and the animosity towards APCHA. So it's 19 months that I first heard that. You guys probably heard it long before that. I don't think I'm going to go into any more about the growth thing. I don't think this is the perfect venue nor the time of day to do it, but I'd love to have a conversation with you some other time about it.
Skippy.
We're going in order. Yeah, I wasn't going to say much, but important stuff out here, so I'll take a few minutes. First thing I want to do is thank David Lawfren for his service. I've known David for a long time, coached his kids in AVSC. He's been just a really real member of our community, and it's thankful for his service. It's sad to see him go, and so I would just encourage anyone who feels the same way to just call him, shoot him a text, tell him we're with him, we miss him, and we'll look forward to seeing him up Valley when he can make it. I just think that support of community is really needed right now, for him and others like him. General observation, and it may be completely off base, and I don't want to send the wrong message to staff, because I see a variety of smaller items coming forward that come from direct observations with members of our community. So I'm not trying to say we shouldn't be responsive. I think it's really great, but I am always, and part of this may be that we're moving to this monthly thing, and as we've said, a lot of the other work is sort of the undercurrent that's going on not at meetings. So if that's the case, just please disregard. But I'm always mindful of the sort of Eisenhower quote that I'll butcher, right? Which is, we can't allow the immediate to displace the necessary, right? And so when we are talking about these bigger conversations around community trust, the longevity of the program, and all of that, I just want to make sure that as we are being responsive to things that come up that may represent a small portion of those in the system, or an edge case that's important, that we're not losing track of really the big stones in the river that need to be moved. To those points, and I receive, and I understand both your points, Rachel, your points, Kelly, and frankly, Greg, which doesn't mean I have agreement with many or all of them, but I do really understand them. And, while fear is real, and it is an informative experience, right, that we should not push aside or bypass, I think we have to lead from curiosity, right? If Greg is feeling this way, or what's our favorite columnist's name, is feeling that way, other people are too. And it doesn't mean we have to agree with that, but I do think the approach of, well, where is this coming from? Where is that distrust seated? Because our responsibility as stewards of the program and growing the program is to answer to those. And we're not going to be able to sufficiently answer to everyone's concerns. I don't think that's the case, but they are there as a teachable moment for us to know what to focus on. And I think the evidence of that is in our work, right? Standards for sellers, the buyer's guarantee, the updated deed restriction, right sizing. Those have come in not an insignificant amount from the push of some of those voices, and those are really valid concerns. So, I appreciate the fear of where, for instance, more information could lead, but I don't think we can ever be afraid of more information. I think information is just that, and it provides us the opportunity to act based on a shared set of facts. And the more we can have a shared set of facts, I believe the more we'll be able to reduce that fear over time. And so, I think that's important. And I would seek that as well. We've talked about it before, the renewed social contract, right? This is a trade in some sense, right? We are providing an opportunity, a benefit, a lifestyle to individuals. I'm myself trying to be one of those individuals who the free market would not otherwise permit. And so what is our commitment back to the community? And for the person outside of that system, what are they receiving in the labor, the benefit to community, et cetera, from the inclusion of those individuals in the community? And I think that benefit's tremendous, but maybe we've lost sight of that a bit, right? And so I think we have to see this as an opportunity to co-creatively re-engage in that process. And I do believe that a stronger, resilient, and in my mind, a expanded system is the result of that, so for what it's worth.
John.
This came up last night, and Greg asked the question, I believe, about APCHA and trust. We talked about it with Robin today. I think we do a newsletter. I think I've seen a newsletter, right?
There's one coming out in mid-August.
I would love to see in that newsletter compliance case, compliance issues reported, compliance cases investigated, and or something where we're giving more information, because that's where I think a lot of this distrust come from. We've worked hard on the lottery system. We actually had it audited at one point to make sure it was a random system, right? We just recently saw that. Because that's where people get special treatment for lotteries. There's people renting when they're actually not, breaking the rules or whatever else. So to have a report in that newsletter where we give at least some information, to me, the more information, the better, right? That we can, within reason, would be helpful, right? Because I get it. I get it on the street. So-and-so's, so-and-so's renting their place. Well, are they? Or so-and-so's not here 2 months, 6 months a year. I had a conversation with somebody today about that. And so to understand that we've investigated it, we resolved the issue, and that actually, maybe it's a category 5 or 6 things that we're looking at, right? And we report it, nope, in compliance, out of, whatever, that the public knows. Because it feels like it falls in a vacuum. Once you're investigating, she had no idea, what the results of your,
Yeah.
or she acted like she had no idea. But anyway.
She acted like, yeah, she did. Right. Which can happen
That's
too.
my only comment.
Oh,
That
that's
was
a
just,
great comment.
Yeah. So just a couple things. So I think back to your point on not discussing, I think you're welcome to discuss compliance cases. I think if it came before the board, you would just have to recuse yourself because you could be seen as prejudging the case, I think is kind of what Tom Smith might say. And then, I think Francie, great point, John. I mean, I think there is a disconnect. I think there's a vocal minority of people that make a lot of noise. Mm-hmm. And I think, there are elected officials who I have spoken to who have said, I know of this situation, and I followed up and I said, give me an address, right? Where is it? Oh, well, right, I don't really know. And right, and I've had that same sort of thing with just people who come up on the street and they say, well, so there's somebody in my neighborhood. Well, what's the address? Well, I don't want to turn them in. Well, then, right, I mean, how are we supposed to know? But I think the other thing that happens more, which to me is sort of a little bit more concerning, is people will start going off on how much they hate APCHA. And I'll say, well, why? And then they'll tear into Burlingame 3. Yeah. Right, and I say, well, that's not even, right? I think there's just a disconnect people don't understand necessarily. So, could be the newsletter, just, I don't know how you do that, but I think just more communication. My opinion, I think staff is very transparent. I think staff is very compassionate and in a lot of instances. And I have seen nothing that gives me any concern about an overbearing APCHA or anything that would create legitimate distrust within the community. And I think I've been doing this for, 4 years now. So I have not seen any of that. And I think for me, I wish that we could more clearly communicate that to the public. So.
Well, it's the Woody Creek thing where that was a completely would not harm anybody.
Right.
It would be good for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect example.
And they didn't, how are they going to screw us again?
Right.
From a residue of, decades
Right.
ago.
Although the night I went, that night, there was that guy who said, this is win-win, guys,
Yeah.
Does the city communications person oversee, help with the APCHA department and all? We don't have any communicator for APCHA.
We have, we
Is
work
someone
with
assigned?
we work with that company out of Denver, Slate.
Okay.
Yeah, but
It sounds like you need, I agree newsletters would be the way to go, so you need a reporter for APCHA. You need your own reporter in-house, explaining things, and I don't know what staff,
That's trained by
what
Allison.
staff that is, but I do know that it's been called a priority for so long now, that what do we rearrange so that, that someone's full focus is trust, essentially.
Well, I think I just got a wave from GrassRoots to let us know that we're being broadcast live, and that was one of our outreach measures. If anyone should want to tune in on one of these exciting meetings, and it's so.
Views we get on YouTube.
I agree entirely with better communications and better outreach, and I had thought we did have a compliance report at this meeting, but to have it published in some way that's anonymized and not bragging over evictions would be really good. But, when you're an agency that has the effect of denying people at a certain rate because they didn't return their information, or they're over income, or there's no units for their income, there's going to be a lot of angst. There's going to be a lot of angst. There always is. And those people who lost have friends to talk to and social groups to talk to and everything like that. And, I'm not saying there aren't real problems, but I do think that when you're an agency that has to draw a line and tell people no, it's never really that pleasant for anyone.
Yeah, totally fair.
So there are those aspects. And I just would like to say I appreciate everyone's input and the robust discussions that are had at this table.
Me too. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
Great. Would take
Kelly
Kelly with the
was
motion to
waving.
adjourn.
Just one quick comment. Well, I mean, we do need to be telling our stories better, because there's also the issue of just inefficiency in our system that is never gonna, is always gonna be a critique, right? And I think there's a way to sort of change some of that on its head, to actually portray value in the system. And I just say things like we know there's empty bedrooms and those people are entitled to have those empty bedrooms. We built that into the system, right? But what we could say is, wow, look at these thousands of years of work service that our retirees have provided to the community, or look at how many school children are being raised living in APCHA in our community. I just wonder if we make a better concerted effort on communications, that some of those things get, I think offered in really positive lights. So I'll end on that.
Thanks.
I'd like to add just one more thing to my short thing. It's really short.
Go ahead.
I know you all want to go home. I just want to add that these are people's homes, and that's probably, next to people's families, the most emotional push button that people have.
Yeah,
and so we're going to be dealing with a lot of emotion no matter what we do. And that's kind of why we're here as the board. And I would like us to help sort of protect the staff a little bit, because, and take some of that heat, because they work so hard. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And they're not biased in anything. So anyway, I just want to say it's built in when you talk about somebody's home that you're going to have angst and turmoil and huge emotions.
And that I think that any decision that this board makes, we're not going to please everyone.
Yeah.
Right? If it's a tough decision, somebody's going to be unhappy, right?
Yeah.
I motion to adjourn.
Microphone.
And it's roll call.
John?
Aye.
Carson?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes, thank you all.
Rachel?
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Allison? Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Meeting is adjourned.
Stand up.
You know what I heard? Wells Fargo's money's yellow. It's not actually green.
Stopped.
I'm gonna spread that rumor.
Tell everyone.